outside faces from foreign
Thank you, honorable members.
talk about taking over.
I have the honor now to call on the honorable leader of the opposition to make his presentation. Honorable leader of the opposition, you may proceed. Just let's give a few minutes so that we can sort out some technical issues. We've been having connectivity issues. Honorable members, bear with us. There seems to be some connectivity issues, as I've said. We should have it sorted out in a few moments.
But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one caress, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know. We gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break. Our fathers came here and they lived and died here, and we ain't moving nowhere. Make no mistake.
Honorable members, I've been insisting for the last few weeks that we have redundancy independent of the current provider of bandwidth and connectivity. I have been assured everything is okay, and I will insist now that the clerk provide redundancy that is independent of our current producer in the system. You've all been experiencing problems, especially during the morning sessions, and today it was at its worst. I actually had to ride my hotspot on my phone when we started. Honorable Chief Whip, any updates on us? For us?
Yes, sir. Based on what we saw in the technician's room, the opposition leader just signed it.
But we still have to bring him online to get the feed. But we still have to bring him into the feed, into the house. He's on now? Great. Honorable members, it's my honor to call on the Leader of the Opposition, the Honorable Member, Mr. Joseph Harman, to make his contribution. Honorable Leader of the Opposition, you may proceed.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, we don't have the audio yet in here. So let me just hold you for a second so that we can get the feed coming through the speakers in the dome. Just give us a test.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, I rise to speak on behalf of the opposition and more than half of the population who we represent according to the published results of the elections of 2020. But in this debate, Mr. Speaker, but the many thousands the many children that are not going to benefit in any meaningful way from this budget. I speak for all Guyanese, regardless of ethnicity or party affiliation, party loyalty, or how you casted your vote. I also rise, Mr. Speaker, to criticize our own conduct during the exchanges that took place during the budget debate. There can be no acceptable explanation for us in this House descending to the levels of the honorable members on the government side of this House whose unsolicited abuse began this gross loss of civility. But, Mr. Speaker, as is known, a mistake repeated more than once is a decision. So when the Honorable Attorney General, Mr. Anil Nandlalu, just spoke, whispered so loudly as he left the chambers on Wednesday, 25th of February, so that we can all hear his invective directed at Member of Parliament Tabitha Sarbo Hali. We have to assume it was intended in its full vulgarity. Mr. Speaker, I urge you to take the appropriate actions to usher in decorum in this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, I stand on the shoulders of my colleagues who dealt exceptionally well and dispatched attempts by the honorable members of the government side of the House to submit distortions about the stellar and transformative tenure of the APNU AFC coalition between 2015 and 2020. It is not my desire to be repetitive on these matters. However, it will be remiss of me to ignore some key issues which the honorable members on the government side of the House chose to lament. Those issues, Mr. Speaker, had nothing to do with policies, programs, and budgetary affairs that would serve to make a difference in the lives of the people of this country. To my colleagues, the APNU AFC MPs, you have done an excellent job. From our first speaker, Ms. Amanza Walton Desir, to our penultimate speaker, Ms. Cathy Hughes, you have disassembled this budget and explained its content so that the ordinary man and woman in Guyana can understand it. I say to you, quod erat demonstrat. What was to be proved has been proven. That is to say, the budget is vacuous, it is vapid, and it is visionless. To the public servants who worked very hard to try to put this Humpty Dumpty budget together again, I congratulate you for your hard work. Unfortunately, how the budget itself is so mixed up, it is difficult to make the several parts cohere to make a whole. Mr. Speaker, it will also be ungracious of me not to welcome back Dr. Ashley Singh. But I also empathize with you, Dr. Ashley Singh. This is not your budget. This is not your budget. This is a three-card trick. And you understand it, I'm sure, better than most. Mr. Speaker, as has become the norm in recent times, the Honorable Member, Mr. Joseph Hamilton, is the first speaker and in his unresearched and unintelligent manner sought to attack the education qualification of the leader of the opposition by comparing those of the Prime Minister with that of the leader of the opposition. I am sure that the Honorable Prime Minister would have been embarrassed by such crassness. Mr. Hamilton would know that I am not fazed by political barbs. However, he must also himself be aware that on the government minister's credentials posted on the internet by the government itself, under the Honorable Member's education is stated in bold red, not listed, meaning there's nothing there. There's nothing there, Honorable Member. At least they could have put up a certificate of qualification issued by the institution at 6 Allied Street in Georgetown. That might be there, something for you there. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to dwell on that because a number of persons on the government side have stooped to certain levels that seems to me that they are unable to debate us. They are unable to match our research. They are unable to match our delivery, and so have to resort to tools and obstacles in order to help them in their presentations. But we are not going to go that way. The Honourable Member, Mr. Nandlal himself, just showed a whole set of photographs and so on. But I'm sure if you were to examine those pieces of evidence that he sought to produce, you will find that they contradict quite a lot of what he's saying. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that you did, in fact, ask the Honourable Member to ensure that those bits and pieces that he sought to rely on, that they are made part of the record of the House. Mr. Speaker, the last speaker spoke at length about this question of representing the African Guyanese. And several other speakers spoke to that issue. And so, Mr. Speaker, this question of ethnicity has to be dealt with. We have to deal with it. The question has arisen over and over in this debate. I wish to start off by taking a passage from Mr. Hugh Desmond Hoyt in his contribution to the budget debate in 1993. And he stated, and his words in 1993 are as relevant as if they occur today. And I quote, "Undoubtedly, this is an important matter, and we will be doing ourselves and our country a disservice if we were to pretend that an ethnic question did not exist in our country." Hear me, Mr. Nandlal. This is Desmond Hoyt in 1993, just after the elections of October of 1992.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, I don't think
Yes,
we
sir.
use Mr. We use comrade or honorable.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm sure Mr. Nandal might not like the terminology comrade, so I say
No,
honorable.
this is the standing orders. Has nothing
Yes.
whatsoever
Honorable
to do
member.
with the honorable member, Mr. Nandlal.
Honorable member, Mr. Nandlal. In fact, in every plural society, Mr. Speaker, there are tensions. And in every plural society, there are people who seek to take advantage of differences of race, culture, religion, and social background. But the important thing for political leaders, the important thing for people who would like to see their country make progress in a context of peace and tranquility is to decide how best we can manage tension within our country. As political leaders, we ought not to acknowledge the fact of ethnic discrimination because it exists. But we ought to confront it and deal with it in an intelligent and constructive manner. We need to understand today that there is much anger outside on the streets on this issue, that there are many people who perceive that ethnic discrimination is rampant. The point, Mr. Speaker, is not whether what they perceive is right or wrong. The reality is their perception. And it is our duty as political leaders to minimize that perception and try to get people to understand that the better way is to find a modus vivendi in which all of us will live in peace and harmony. But, Mr. Speaker, what is important is how leaders treat with this national problem. I do not think, as we approach this question, that it is time for cosmetology. I do believe that labels such as oneness and we are one without more are not going to help. Those are outward and visible signs. Those are visible things. They might give a certain political kudos, but in the end, they're not truly beneficial. The whole issue has to be confronted by way of a national debate and national understanding. The political will to resolve this issue in the best interest of the country has to be demonstrated now, I posit, Mr. Speaker. The APNU AFC is ready to act. We are ready to act. I must say, however, Mr. Speaker, that the attitude displayed by the honorable member, Mr. Nandlal, who just spoke, will only exacerbate this situation. Mr. Speaker, the APNU-AFC is crystal clear when it comes to this matter, not just in rhetoric, but in action in every single thing that we do. The very idea of a coalition, Mr. Speaker, invites and gives comfort to ethnicity, diversity, and eschews the spirit of ethnic polarization. Mr. Speaker, to be recalled that one of the first acts of the David Granger-led administration in 2015 was to establish a Department of Social Cohesion, which functioned at the highest level of government. And the concept formed part of all of the programs and focus of every single ministry. That record is inescapable and cannot be erased. Ethnic tensions, Mr. Speaker, will exist. There will always be irresponsible citizens and leaders, but the question is, what do you do when it manifests itself? Under our watch, the Ethnic Relations Commission remained a robust, apolitical, independent institution with full powers under the law to pursue anyone who sought to sow the seeds of division among our people. We never for 1 second considered interfering with the independence of the Ethnic Relations Commission. Once it is allowed to do its work, Mr. Speaker, and with robust leadership, the Commission can play a pivotal role in resolution of this national problem. Mr. Speaker, the daily revelations, however, in the media of the ERC appears to be, in my view, an attempt to dismantle this very important commission and to damage its impartiality. We must guard against this insidious attempt by persons who are uncomfortable with the composition of the Ethnic Relations Commission. Mr. Speaker, as I said, mere labels will not solve the ethnicity issue. I would be satisfied if there were to be a genuine effort to give effect to our oneness. Unfortunately, while this seemed to be an aspiration of President Ali, we see no financial allocation in the budget to give effect to this oneness as a program. In fact, the regime dismantled the Department of Social Cohesion, replacing it with nothing. President Ali, don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. When the Granger administration established the Department of Social Cohesion, we gave financial allocations to that department to do its work. In 2017, we allocated $111,767,000. In 2018, we allocated $395,544,000. In 2019, we allocated $836 million. We walk the walk and we talk the talk. Mr. Speaker, on the subject of ethnicity, it is not what you say, but what you do, and that's important. The second issue I wish to address, Mr. Speaker, is this question of consultation. Another issue which arose in the formulation of the budget. Many persons said, oh, we had extensive consultations. The minister himself, Minister of Finance, spoke about how many persons he consulted. The president, in his inaugural address to the House, stressed cooperation and working together. This, of course, is consistent with Article 13 of our Constitution, which speaks of an inclusionary democracy, providing increasing opportunities for the participation of citizens, with particular emphasis on those areas of decision-making that directly affects their well-being. Mr. Speaker, working together must involve a process of consultation for openness and of participation in decision-making, and would be, in our view, a necessary condition of reinforcing resilience within the population as a whole. To quote from the late Winston Murray, a member of Parliament, an excellent member of Parliament, in his budget debate of 2009, he said, I would like to say to the Honorable Minister that working together cannot and must not be a tool of convenience invoked in times of difficulty or crisis as a rallying call to cope with the situation. Rather, it must be a practice that is embedded in our way of life to get things done and to move the country forward. He further said that the evidence is that the government's approach to this idea of working together is at best ambivalent. These words by Winston Murray are just as appropriate today as they were in 2009. Mr. Speaker, there was no consultation with the opposition in the formulation of this budget. And so it is deficient, it is defective, and it is disastrous in many areas. Mr. Speaker, it is time that President Ali climbs down from his horse and recognizes that the only way forward for this country is by meaningful consultation. Barra Jagdeo has had his time. The Honorable Member Barra Jagdeo has had his time and more, and should remove his heavy hands off of your administration. The Constitution, President Ali, sets no precondition for a consultation between the President and the Leader of the Opposition. In Article 127, Article 161, Article 191, Article 198, Article 200, Article 207, Article 210, and Article 212. None of them sets any precondition for consultation. Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker, in my own public statement, after we were sworn in as MPs on the 2nd of September 2020, I made it very clear that the opposition was prepared to cooperate on issues of territorial integrity, public security, public health, national sovereignty, and other areas which we deem to be in the public interest. Mr. Speaker, this is quite unlike the PPP, who in 2015, after our election victory, which was not challenged, they refused to cooperate. In fact, they refused to take up their seats in this House for several months. Several months, they refused to take up their seats in this House. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, we have reached out, even in an environment where the election results which installed the Irfan Ali regime are the subject of 2 petitions before the courts. Mr. Speaker, this intransigence is wearing the patience of citizens thin and can only lead to self-destruction if allowed to continue. Mr. Speaker, now to some specific issues in the budget. Mr. Speaker, the vision outlined by the Irfan Ali administration and described as achieving 6...
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, I don't know if you were here or tuned in, but with regards to His Excellency the President, I said I will only accept honorable members quoting from the address which His Excellency made here. And if you're going to refer to that and you want to name His Excellency, please use the right salutation.
Mr. Speaker, I am quoting from the document that is the budget speech by the Honorable Minister of Finance, in which he quotes the President. And this is why I'm saying it is there outlined as the vision. But I take note of your exhortation, Mr. Speaker.
In that case, yes, just please use the proper salutation for His Excellency.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, when we examine closely, this is a sort of a hodgepodge of ideas put together that do not connect to each other by any common thread. Mr. Speaker, the PPP regime inherited a well-thought-out and articulated 20-year vision for Guyana, titled the Green State Development Strategy Vision 2040. Mr. Speaker, permit me to briefly speak to this strategy, because it appears that the Honorable Member, Mr. Ramson, all decked in his Queen's College tie, sought to criticize the strategy and in so doing displayed a chilling ignorance of the document itself, except one paragraph in the executive summary, which deals with the investment assured in the model. For the Honorable Member and his colleagues, let me elucidate. The Green State Development Strategy, Mr. Speaker, is Vision 2040, is Guyana's 20-year national development policy that reflects the guiding vision and principles of the Green Agenda. It is an inclusive and prosperous Guyana that provides a good quality of life for all its citizens based on sound education and social protection, low carbon and resilient development, providing new economic opportunities, justice, and political empowerment. The central objective is development that provides a better quality of life for all Guyanese, derived from the country's natural wealth. Mr. Speaker, this strategy took 2 years to develop. In 2017, there was a first level document which was produced, and that was called Framework 1. That was completed in 2017. And that prioritized Guyana's long-term development. In the following year, multi-stakeholder thematic expert groups with 116 participating professionals from government, public service, and private sector and civil society groups were formed to deliberate on this development theme. Their work established the policy trajectory under these themes. A third layer of consultation ensured input from Guyanese citizens throughout the country. And it was held in 33 clusters in the coast as well as the hinterland, drawing participation from more than 1,600 citizens in surrounding communities and villages in what were called green conversations. Mr. Speaker, the strategy therefore promotes 3 key messages. 1, it speaks to managing the natural resources wealth. 2, it speaks to support economic resilience. And 3, it speaks to build capital and institutional capacity. Those are the 3 key messages. And there are 8 thematic areas in this strategy. And these are the economic restructuring and diversification, sustainable management of our natural resources, the transition to renewable and clean energy, resilient infrastructure and green tongues, healthy, educated, and socially cohesive population, internationally competitive trade and investment, good governance and strong institution, and finally, sound fiscal policies. Mr. Speaker, this strategy was done with the help and cooperation of the United Nations Environment. It was, as I said, it was well articulated and came from the bottom up. It is a vision that is a vision for all of Guyana. And it's not a vision that you put together in 2 months. This is 2 years of consultations at various levels. And so when we speak to the strategy and to vision, this is what we're talking about. Well thought out, well articulated. And so this vision of oneness that we hear about, or we are one, it has to be articulated. It cannot just come from the top and then be installed at the bottom. It has to come from the people. And this is what the PPP inherited. Hard, methodical work. And what they want to do is throw it away because they don't like it. He wants to go back to the low carbon development strategy, which is in fact one of the elements of this larger strategy that was developed by all of these consultations. So, Mr. Speaker, this question of vision is important for us as Guyanese. And we don't just buy into something called a vision because it is stated by His Excellency the President. This vision has to represent what it is that the people say they want. What are their inputs into it? So, Mr. Speaker, that's about vision. But, Mr. Speaker, a budget, as we're discussing and we are debating here now, has to be set within a political framework. And it seeks to deliver a quality of life to the citizens in cycles, either 1 year, 3 year, or 5 year cycle. But the budget, of course, is for a 1 year period. That political framework, Mr. Speaker, has to be a true framework. If not, it can skew the manner in which resources are allocated in the budget. So if you have a bad political narrative, the resources will go in a bad way. And Mr. Speaker, here we have noted speakers from the government side attempted to implant a false narrative of the events which occurred after the 2nd of March 2020 and are accusing the APNU AFC of stalling democracy for 5 months. I heard the Honorable Member Mr. Nandalal speak about rigging and all of that. Well, we will see in these petitions where the proof is. All these issues about rigging are allegations. I can say to the Honorable Member that the only proof ever that there was any rigging or fraud in the courts was the PPP. And that was way back when Hamilton Green was challenging for, I believe there's a seat on the East Bank of Demerara. No time after that was ever any talk about rigging or so on, any proof of it in the court. So I challenge the Honorable Member to bring the proof of what he's saying and bring me a court document that says so. The petitions here will say, what happened. And I don't want the Mr. Speaker to go into the full details because I understand the sub judice rule, but I do believe, Mr. Speaker, that you allowed some liberal interpretation of that rule when the Honourable Member Mr. Ramson spoke and sought to lay documents in the parliamentary records on matters which are actually before the court and are live issues before the court. So I will not go down that road, Mr. Speaker. I would want to say, however, that this talk about stalling democracy is a big joke. But if the situation were not as it is, I will call it a joke. But Mr. Speaker, this environment where the PPP regime has almost total control of the print and electronic media, the repetition of this false narrative can become a reality for some of our people in this country. And the PPP all know it is a false narrative. Mr. Speaker, it's a notorious fact that there are 2 petitions before the courts which challenge the legality of the election results and a very liberal interpretation which was given to the Honourable Mr. Ramson. But Mr. Speaker, I would not go into the details of it because I believe, however, I should avert to at least a summary of the true narrative, because all of these speakers on the government side, they've been harping at this, and so they feel that by continuous repetition, a lie can become the truth. I'm not saying that they are lying, but basically that is what is written, that by constant repetition, a lie becomes true. And so this is what they believe. And so as not to offend that rule, Mr. Speaker, I just want to chronicle some of the events without actually going into what the court is dealing with in the petitions themselves. Mr. Speaker, on the 2nd of March, we went to elections. On the 4th of March, during the tabulation of the results at Region 4 office, GCOM, it is a fact. In fact, the Honourable Member Mr. Ramson spoke to himself being in that building when he said he saw people coming out with boxes. So he places himself at the scene. And the PPP hierarchy stormed the building to stop the tabulation from taking place. Stormed the building.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition,
yes,
so you're stating that as a statement of fact. And
yes, it is. It is published in the newspapers on the 5th of March.
Yeah, and there are other articles I read about allegations. So could you, I can't accept you saying there's a statement of fact, right? fact
All
hasn't
right,
been
Mr.
established.
Speaker, I would say it is reported in the media
Thank you very much.
on the 5th of March that this is what occurred. And subsequent to that, 3 actions were filed by a gentleman by the name of Mr. Holidar, represented by the member Mr. Nadalal. 3 separate actions. The final one had the impact of causing the chairman of the Elections Commission not to act in fear of being in contempt of an obligation which she gave, an undertaking which she gave to the court. That situation, Mr. Speaker, was an action when it was filed. The Honorable Attorney General was told by the Chief Justice, and it is recorded, that this has nowhere to go. Where are you going with this? But it was allowed to remain for 3 months as a halo over the head of everyone. So, Mr. Speaker, after that period of time, there was, of course, some backward and forward taking place, and the CARICOM Secretariat got involved. A CARICOM team came here of prime ministers and met with the president and Mr. Jagdeo, Honorable Member Jagdeo, and decided on a course of action. That course of action saw the 2 principals signing a document that says, we agree that there's going to be a recount. And that recount took place. It took 33 days, and several issues arose out of that recount, which are chronicled in the petitions themselves. So I don't want to go through them, but they're chronicled in the petition. And so, Mr. Speaker, it is not for the Honorable Member, Mr. Jagdeo, or anyone else to say that the AP and the AFC stalled democracy for 5 months. Matters were taking place. There was an agreement signed by the parties. So how in the face of all of that can anyone say or accuse us of stalling democracy? Mr. Speaker, that is indeed a matter which should not continue, because it is not true, and to the extent to which you keep repeating that falsehood, it sets an impression on the minds of Guyanese people that it is true when it is not so. It is important to understand, Mr. Speaker, that in this country, the PPPC was awarded 233,000 votes, or thereabouts, and the AP and the AFC 217,926. And so it is not as if this was a landslide and that the AP and the AFC just got 1 seat, even though I'm hearing from the honorable members on the government side, one say we will lose 3 seats, the other one say 5. The honorable member Nandala now say this afternoon 10. But I don't know where you're going with that. You're living in a fool's paradise. A fool's paradise. Mr. Speaker, many of us watched on American television on the 6th of January 2021, when persons stormed the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., the United States of America, while lawmakers were certifying the results of the American elections. Their intent was to stop what they perceived to be fraud. The reports are, Mr. Speaker, that persons were seeking out the U.S. Vice President, Mr. Mike Pence, and Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. I trust we don't have a situation like that, Mr. Speaker, here, because I don't know where you will hide. They had to be taken to a safe place. Subsequent actions, Mr. Speaker, by the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation and other law enforcement agencies have seen many of these persons charged and placed before the courts. Investigations are still ongoing. These persons were variously described as hooligans, etc. Here in Guyana, in March 2020, persons who reportedly stormed the office of the Elections Commission building in Region 4 destroying records, and preventing the Commission from making electoral declarations are no different from the persons who stormed the Capitol building and described as hooligans. Some who sit in this honorable house and seek to cast off their shame and disgrace by revisiting the electoral narrative. Hooligans to honorable members. Mr. Speaker, in my last budget speech, I called for a sum of money to be allocated for the purpose of house-to-house registration to cleanse the voters list. While, Mr. Speaker, a sum of $4.1 billion is stated for GCOM, because there was no consultation with us in this budget, we shall have to await the interrogation of these sums allocated to the Elections Commission to determine what sum, if any, was allocated for this purpose. But Mr. Speaker, from our own calculation, when we take away the current expenses from the sum allocated, we see that that which is left could hardly run a local government elections, much less a house-to-house registration exercise meant to cleanse the voters list. So this will have to be a matter which has to be dealt with, Mr. Speaker, in a very important way, because the world has said it in all of the observation reports on the 2020 elections that the voters list has to be cleansed. It has to be cleansed. Mr. Speaker, Guyana is at the cusp of economic takeoff, and we are beginning to receive oil revenues. Guyanese have been hopeful that they would have benefited from a budget that imbues them with hope and confidence in a prosperous future. The Honorable Member Ashley Singh was given a sound platform for takeoff, which the Granger administration worked tirelessly to create. Dr. Singh grudgingly acknowledges at page 8, paragraph 3.2 of his speech that the real GDP grew by 43.5% in 2020. So instead of the empty treasury, the PPP fed this nation in the first 6 months. This is what is emerging in this budget. One, that real GDP growth of 43.5% took place in 2020. That over $206 million from the Natural Resources Fund, it's in the bank. Remember, the PPP said that we spent it all out, but it is in the bank, and it is now in the records to show it. Thirdly, they inherited a solid tax base, which increased the number of persons contributing to the GRA revenue. And so many persons who are outside there earning huge sums of money have now been brought into the tax base, easing the burden on some of us who are employed, making us the employed poor, while some who are outside of that tax base, earning billions, are not taxed in the way they should. So this helped in some way. Fourthly, Mr. Speaker, we introduced an amnesty which provided tax delinquents to come in and settle their obligations. This, of course, raised, I believe, somewhere in the vicinity of $9 billion. Fifthly, Mr. Speaker, we introduced a Natural Resources Fund law, which was heralded by the World Bank as being progressive and transparent, and laid the groundwork for withdrawals from the fund for purposes which have to be cleared by the National Assembly. So you see the safeguards here, Mr. Speaker. It has to be cleared by you, by the members of this House. Sixthly, we left an improved agriculture sector. And 7, a buoyant public service with a clear plan for the future and being the engine of government's work in a modern economy. These among more, Mr. Speaker, the PPP inherited. But more importantly, they inherited a proud Guyana that the world had taken notice of in the 5 short years. What we saw in Budget 2021 was an attempt to reverse the economic, social, and other gains the country made, and a dismantling of anything connected to the AP and new EFC administration, to return us to a state of that tattered legacy left by the Honourable Member Mr. Barajagdio in 2011, that legacy of extrajudicial killings, that legacy of drug trafficking, that legacy of a shattered economy. This is what we inherited. Budget 2021, Mr. Speaker, ought to have been focused on lifting people out of poverty and providing them with a good life. What we have gotten instead is the opposite. Budgets in the past have been criticized for lacking vision, but this budget takes the cake in that regard. It is wholly visionless. At a time when Guyana is beginning to realize these revenues and is in a position to embark on transformative projects for the benefit of the Guyanese people, we are saddled with a budget that is basically a hodgepodge of PPP self-interests hurriedly put together. Budget 2021, as we said, is vacuous, it is vapid, and it is visionless. Mr. Speaker, Guyanese have been betrayed by this budget. First and foremost, it has to be recognized that the PPP has abandoned hard-working public servants and treated them with contempt and disregard. There's absolutely nothing in this budget for the public servants. They will benefit from zero increase in salaries. We have called for a minimum of 10% increase across the board for public servants. And the increase, we expect, Dr. Ashley Singh, that you will make that announcement before the end of this process. Our frontline workers in the health sector have been left empty-handed with nothing to show, no reward or recognition for the hard work over the past years. During the devastating pandemic, they have worked beyond the call of duty. This budget 2020 does not offer them anything. It's an insult, it's disrespectful to them. Shame on you, PB, for ignoring our frontline workers. Billions of dollars. Juice, sugar at way above the price of sugar on the world market. Our frontline workers in public service must feel an emptiness in their heart and must be wondering whether they should stay in their profession. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister of Agriculture has been very critical about our scrutiny on allocations to Gaisuko. You see, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member makes a point of equating Gaisuko with sugar workers because it is in his party's political interest to do so. However, Mr. Speaker, let me quote from former President Donald Ramatar to bring greater light and bring this matter into greater relief. And he said, while we are on the subject about the mismanagement of public resources, let us again address the issue of $2 billion more for Gaisuko. This money, without a proper plan to restructure the industry, will go up in smoke, just the same as the $7 billion we spent on Gaisuko in the last budget. But I do not want to ask you to take my word for it. I want you to listen to the words of former President Ramatar. He said the industry needs to be restructured, to be reorganized, as much as it needs financial input at this stage. Not to reorganize this could end up just throwing money at the problem without tangible results. Mr. Speaker, it seems to me we should not keep financing Gaisuko without the appropriate reform plans. And Mr. Speaker, the gentleman who now heads Gaisuko is supposed to be a turnaround expert. At least that is what he holds himself out as being. And so we are now waiting for this reform plan. But even before a plan, we are pumping billions of dollars into Gaisuku. And so the minister is wanting us to believe that this money is going straight to the sugar workers. Not so. The bulk of this money is going to mismanagement and to nepotism in this industry. It's going to businesses that are connected to the PPP administration. But Mr. Speaker, that is not all. The former president, Ramatar, thinks that in addition to this waste, the PPP even now has at the back of its mind the privatization of the sugar industry. Here's another handy quote about the necessity for reform. And he says this, and I quote, "If this is not done, then the point will be reached where the government will look for the easy way out and accept privatization of the industry. They would say, we tried. We have put in a lot of money, but it does not work. Therefore, we have no other option but to sell out the industry. That will be a huge collective slap in our faces and a great letdown to our ancestors who invested their lifeblood in sugar," end of quote. Mr. Speaker, what a statement. Mr. Speaker, you know, there's a familiar expression which says, mouth open, Tory jump out. Former president doesn't have to have confidence. He doesn't have that confidence that the current expenditure is genuine. Rather, without a plan, it is just money thrown on the fire to make it seem like the PPP is trying. When in reality, there's every chance they intend to offload the burden and privatize Gaisuku. Mr. Speaker, I do not even have to highlight such audacity through my own arguments. Here's another member of the PPP laying out their playbook for sugar. So when Guyanese ask why sugar has failed, perhaps a better question is, did the PPP ever intend for sugar to succeed? The next time I see President Ramatar, I will have to give him a congratulatory hand. Well, I can't shake his hand now. A congratulatory fist pump or something like that for his candor. We are grateful that he has had the fortitude to express what is known to be true. Mr. Speaker, when you hear something like this coming from a former president, does it make you question the true purpose of everything that's in this budget? Since there is no cohesive plan, we have to ask ourselves, what exactly is the reason for each and every line item in this budget? So there's no plan for Gaisuku, but we're pumping money into it. There's no vision for this country that has budgetary allocations going to it. So why are we spending all of this money? And so, Mr. Speaker, it's just about playing politics with people's money. That's all it is. And whether these initiatives are designed to succeed is a matter which we'll have to look at. Mr. Speaker, like Budget 2020, this budget that wreaks havoc on the economy and the pocket of poor people who will find that their dollar will be unable to buy less. In fact, it will be able to buy less, and they will sink deeper into hardship. Go to the markets, Dr. Singh. Go to the markets and find out what is happening with the prices for basic commodities. And you will get a better sense of the way ordinary Guyanese people feel. I do not want to say that you have only been back very shortly because you are in a wealthy country. But I believe that in your heart of hearts, that you would not have done a budget like this. And this is why I'm saying this is not your budget. Because this is a budget that's disconnected. It's disconnected from the ordinary man and woman of this country. It is devoid of a medium-term strategy of development for Guyana. It is revisionist, and it is resurrecting failed policies and programs. And instead of a budget that provides economic empowerment to Guyanese, we have a budget which ignores large sections of the population and offers a few handouts to a few. It is a budget, Mr. Speaker, designed to keep people poor, rather than a budget which is packed with programs to economically empower people through access to financing to start. Young people have been ignored and cast aside in this budget, despite the fact that the Honourable Minister of Youth, Culture and Sports boasts about having the largest budget ever. We still need to see what is inside there. Where is your youth policy which will determine where this money is spent? There's no provision for them in the budget. There's no mechanism or program which allows the young people to realize business ideas and initiatives to expand small businesses. Most importantly, however, is that Budget 2021 fails to provide a pathway for us to emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. What we have seen is the placing of a large figure, a large sum to procure vaccines. But we know what that is designed to do. We know what it's designed to do. And even though, Dr. Anthony, you tried your best to explain,
Honorable
it's
member,
not working.
you can use comrade or honorable member. Thank you. Refer to the honorable.
I'm sorry, honorable member. Anthony, it's difficult for you to sell this. There's no plan. There's no plan. Mr. Speaker, the objective in this budget on COVID speaks to navigating the COVID-19 as long as it's there, as long as it's there. And one would have expected some greater clarity on how this objective could be achieved, and the sum of money stated to achieve this purpose. However, what it is we have given is a lump sum. There's no clear policy direction to deal with COVID. And so in the budget in 2020, a sum was placed there for disease control on communicable diseases for a 3-month period in 2020. And the government spent $7 billion on that. In 2021, for a 12-month period, the sum of $8 billion for drugs and medical supplies there. And there's a heavy increase of $6 billion over the 2019 allocation. So this is an area that, Mr. Speaker, we will have to pay special emphasis on, and with respect to the availability of the vaccines to achieve what is called herd immunity. Mr. Speaker, this is a term, this herd immunity is a term which needs to be explained to the ordinary man and woman. Because sometimes when you hear about a herd, you're thinking about a pack of animals behaving in a certain way. And so when we speak about herd immunity, we have to explain to people what it means. In our view, Mr. Speaker, this herd immunity cannot be achieved, and there's no serious plan, in fact, where the vaccines have been identified so far, they cannot even immunize half of the population. I don't know what percentage they use to determine what is herd immunity, but I believe the Honourable Minister of Health will be able to explain that even better. But I can't understand it, that herd immunity can be achieved by a percentage that is less than half of the population. The vaccines itself, Mr. Speaker, the bulk of which is now, I understand, coming from India, seems not to have taken into account the peculiar circumstances of our indigenous people. And that might become a challenge itself to administer 2 doses to one individual. That might be a challenge in some of the indigenous communities. And so I think that the Honourable Minister will have to pay specific attention. I understand that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is now coming on the market, just requires 1 dose, and that is it. So the question of our citizens who live in remote areas and may move from one place to the next might be a challenge in administering 2 doses. Mr. Speaker, the reality makes it even more, calls for a more well-articulated plan with wider stakeholder participation and at a meaningful level. Mr. Speaker, reliance on these vaccines alone as a cure for all in this pandemic seems to have diminished the enthusiasm for testing, tracing, and treatment of our citizens. We seem to be in a holding pattern, and we are waiting for this vaccine. And this can have, of course, negative consequences of spreading rather than containing the virus. Mr. Speaker, there are several other areas of national concern, and two of them which I wish to address. One has to do, of course, with public safety and security, and that the budgetary allocations in this area seems to be heavily focused on community policing groups. Mr. Speaker, since August 2020, we have seen a gradual return to a state of lawlessness in our society, as occurred before 2015. Many of our citizens recall the death squads, the cross-border gun running, the extrajudicial killings, the drug trafficking, and high levels of crime and interpersonal violence that was a hallmark of previous PPP administrations. June 2015 to August 2020, citizens were able to go about their daily lives in relative peace and security. This was because the APNU AFC paid careful attention to the security situation and increased in an exponential way budgetary allocations for the Guyana Police Force, which allowed them to be re-equipped with the tools necessary to do their job. Mr. Speaker, with assistance from the United Kingdom, we undertook a careful study of the police force. And under Colonel Coombs, a British security expert, certain reforms were proposed on which we started to take action on. The Guyana Police Force was redeployed and reorganized in keeping with the administrative regions and the shifting demography of our country. This meant, Mr. Speaker, that police division commanders at a senior level were now deployed to each of the 10 administrative regions, allowing for faster response to criminal activity and, in some cases, proactive patrolling that were confidence building in nature. The deployment of horses to some of the hinterland areas assisted in patrols along our borders. Mr. Speaker, there was an intensification of training of our police ranks at all levels of the force. Our coastal patrols was responsible for a reduction in the level of crime among our fisher folk at sea. Mr. Speaker, the combined effect of these measures meant that the crime rates in this country over the period 2015 to 2020 was one of the lowest in decades. One of the lowest in decades. And we have to thank the Honorable Member, Mr. Ramjatan, who headed that ministry for this stellar performance. And the reports which were left, the 5-year reports which were left, and the Honorable Member, who is now the Minister of Home Affairs, he can read it, it is there. Drug trafficking was slowed up to a trickle at our air, seaports, and border locations.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, you will have 2 minutes to conclude.
How much? Yes, citizen network from community districts and regions to the center to share intelligence. Mr. Speaker, our effort to move Guyana out of the Financial Action Task Force anti-money laundering and countering the finance of terrorism blacklist was admired by many in the international community. And some of our operators became trainers for other countries in the effort to climb out of such a state. So, Mr. Speaker, this is an architecture that the PP inherited. And since then, what has happened? November 2020, the largest drug bust, 11.5 tons of cocaine. Early in August 2020, a shipment of 1.5 tons discovered in Hamburg, Germany, came from Guyana. Aircraft found in the hinterland with cocaine, foreign currency, and weapons. So, Mr. Speaker, of course, the frequent breakouts from these prisons have all left our citizens in a state of fear. And in this regard, this is why this I met with the Commissioner of Police and his senior officers, and we made those points very clear to them. And we trust that we'll have a better understanding going forward. We related our concerns to the police about community policing, about the arbitrary arrest of persons, and so on. We also spoke about the Attorney General's use of the police ranks in large numbers to terrorize citizens in his avaricious pursuit of land. And this is now making people feel that we have a police state. Mr. Speaker, the other quality of life issue I want to deal with water, but since I am not allowed much more time, let me say that our performance has been recognized in page 10 of the report, that there's been a significant improvement in water and sanitation. In closing, Mr. Speaker, let me leave 8 critical points with us, which in my view will move our country forward. 1, our government, or any government, cannot function by just seeing red or green communities. Our communities are made of people. 2, let us agree that constructive engagement based on clear principles and broadened stakeholdership at the national, regional, and community level is a sine qua non for our development. 3, let us immediately shift from this ethnic marginalization and vindictiveness. 4, let us agree to meet to cause a redress on what has occurred in this country. 5, let us agree to collectively focus on poverty and the plight of our poor citizens. 6, let us agree that there is need for immediate and urgent protection of our sovereignty and our national patrimony. David Patterson spoke at length about that in his presentation. 7, that the COVID-19 task force
I don't think, Leader of the Opposition,
with representation at a meaningful level.
Leader of the Opposition,
I wrap up now to say,
Leader of the Opposition, you know, you have to pay some respect. You called on that earlier. The Speaker
yes,
was
sir.
speaking.
I thank you very much.
No, I didn't. I wasn't shutting you down now. Right? I was going to allow you to conclude because I've actually...
I don't want to be disrespectful at all.
Thank you very much,
I'm not a person like that. You know, I grew up in the military. 8, Mr. Speaker, let us agree, because these are important steps I would like, that is why I kept them for the last part of my presentation. Let us agree that there is urgent need to update our electoral laws to ensure a list of electors which reflect the reality of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, colleagues, I leave you with the words of former President of Guyana, Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham. The destiny of the Cooperative Republic is in our hands. Let these be safe hands. Mr. Speaker, for reasons which by now have become very clear in our presentations, I cannot support this budget. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Leader of the Opposition. I just want to inform you. First, when you said you're not allowed, there was an agreement between both sides that you get an hour. That hour expired at 2:40.
Speaker, I wouldn't challenge that at all.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Honorable, you had an opportunity to speak, and it's very disrespectful to speak when the Speaker is speaking. And we did allow the Honorable Leader of the Opposition to make his points, which I thought that the nation needed to hear. So he got an additional 5 minutes. Honorable Prime Minister, it's my honor to also now welcome you to make your contribution to this budget debate. And my time says 3:53.44. Sorry, 3:51, now 0.49.
I'm going to speak to the other 5 minutes.
I didn't hear it 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to express my support for Budget 2021 presented by Senior Minister of Finance, the Honorable Dr. Ashni Kumar Singh, under the theme, A Path to Recovery, Economic Dynamism and Resilience. Mr. Speaker, our government stands proud of this budget, not only because it is the first full-year budget presented by our PPPC administration, nor the fact that it is the largest budget presented in Guyana's history. We are proud because the preparation and presentation of the $381.1 billion budget showcase the immense passion and concern that our government holds for the well-being and upliftment of the people of our country, proven by the ample, strategic, and deliberate allocations across all sectors. More so, Mr. Speaker, we stand proud to have been able to successfully achieve this just on the heels of the 2020 emergency budget, which was mandatorily prepared by our PPPC government to begin the revitalization of our country's economy that faced a dire economic downturn originating from the previous 5 years of gross incompetence and poor leadership that created nothing but hardship and poverty for all the people across this country, except the few and their families and friends, some of who currently sit on the other side of this honorable house, now pretending to care about the people of our country, after they were voted out of office by both a motion of no confidence in 2018 and then at the 2020 general and regional elections. Mr. Speaker, they come here with their dedicated theatrics at every single sitting of this National Assembly, but still have absolutely nothing of substance to contribute or bring to the table for the benefit of the people they claim to represent. How witless they are. Nothing but a self-serving bunch. The people of this country have seen your true colors, and no amount of theatrical performance will convince them otherwise. Mr. Speaker, our government inherited a stagnant economy. All credits due to the failed and visionless APNU-AFC administration, the collapse of which culminated after the passage of the no confidence motion, as mentioned earlier, in December 2018, where we saw with our very own eyes the flagrant violations of our Constitution and rule of law, right through the catastrophic 5 months that followed the March 2nd, 2020 general and regional elections. This struggle was only heightened by the deadly coronavirus pandemic, which we had to and still continue to battle. Apart to recovery, economic dynamism, and resilience speaks volumes, Mr. Speaker, and breathes hope and life into the hearts of our citizens. It speaks of rebirth. It speaks of renewal. But most of all, it speaks of a new era of prosperity for all Guyanese. An era that our people have for too long hoped for without fruition. The work done by Honorable Minister Dr. Ashni Singh and his team in preparing this 2021 budget is quite admirable, and thus they deserve highest commendation for producing a budget that is sure to touch the lives of every single Guyanese in many ways, with plans for rapid development and economic growth. Mr. Speaker, I wish to humbly note that this budget will initiate investments in catalytic and transformative infrastructure, including energy infrastructure, to ensure adequate energy supply at a competitive cost, and transport infrastructure to improve international connectivity, thereby unleashing domestic production and productivity. Permit me to remind you, Mr. Speaker, that this budget is in keeping with our government's vision of making Guyana a truly prosperous country and providing benefits to all our citizens while laying the foundation that projects sustainable long-term growth. Along this thrust, I will wish to highlight the plans for the agencies under the Office of the Prime Minister that will aid us in contributing to the realization of our government's vision for the prosperity and improvement of the lives of all Guyanese throughout the length and breadth of Guyana. However, Mr. Speaker, I've been listening to the debates over the last 5 days, and I came to the conclusion that the honorable members on the other side of the House have a problem with reading. And in order for them to understand the budget, I have a pullout from the newspaper. Sunday Chronicle, February the 14th, budget at a glance. So I urge all the members on the other side of the House to have this pullout. It's just 4 pages of reading, in fact 3 pages of reading, and that will help you to understand the budget. It's a pity that I didn't have to speak before and offer this to you before you made your speeches in this House. Mr. Speaker, your Prime Minister has many portfolios, unlike his predecessor. Power generation, telecommunication innovation, government information and communication services, disaster preparedness, response, and management. In our budget 2021, an estimated $8.4 billion has been allocated to the power generation program, Mr. Speaker. Our government foresees the massive potential that energy holds for an economic boom in Guyana, and we remain true to our intentions to achieve the provision of affordable, stable, and reliable electricity throughout our country. More so, the world remains under attack by the coronavirus pandemic, and utilities and power generators worldwide have been forced to alter their practices and develop strategies to deal with the rapid developments and change in patterns, which, with regard to energy consumption as a result. Now, more than ever, the world requires a reliable supply of electricity to prevent further disruption, and Guyana is no exception. With allocations of $240 million for the Sustainable Energy Program, $628.8 million for the Renewable Energy Improvement Power System Project, $750 million for the Energy Matrix Diversification Program, $500 million for the Solar System Project, and $125 million for the small hydro projects. Our government will now work assiduously to implement the necessary measures that will result in improved standard of living for people through the generation and provision of sufficient, stable, and reliable electricity. Mr. Speaker, allow me to speak on the specific works of the agencies that have a direct bearing on our plans in the power generation sector. Mr. Speaker, an estimated total of $1 billion has been allocated to the Guyana Energy Agency. At present, Guyana is supplied with energy from a variety of energy sources, but at the same time, our country is predominantly reliant on imported fossil-based fuels. Price volatility in international oil markets and the threat of rising temperatures from greenhouse gases necessitate the move to cleaner sources of energy and climate-resilient infrastructure. The most significant step taken to address climate change in Guyana is the development and implementation of, listen to me carefully, the Low Carbon Development Strategy, which was launched in June 2009 and revised in 2010 and 2013. We have returned to the Low Carbon Development Strategy. Your strategy is a bunch of slogans. We need a real strategy that denotes the ways, means, and ends, and approved by the people of Guyana. The strategic vision for the energy sector encompasses the provision of affordable, stable, and reliable energy for households and businesses with an energy mix that includes hydropower, natural gas, solar, and wind, leading to more than 400 megawatts of newly installed capacity over the next 5 years. That's a strategy. And a reduction in the cost of energy by at least 50%. Mr. Speaker, among the measures that our PPPC government is aiming to implement to transform the power sector include the production of 250 megawatts from natural gas in the interim. Urgent action to improve and upgrade the national grid and the completion of the Amelia Falls Hydro Power Project. Cognizant of the declining cost of some renewable energy technologies, the level of maturity of existing energy efficiency technologies, as well as national and international obligations, the Guyana Energy Agency 5-year strategic plan provides key strategic actions to guide the activities of the agency, including the advancement of solar and wind systems for off-grid areas, support for the expansion of the hinterland electrification program, replacement and upgrade of solar PV systems in the hinterland, and the advancement of microgrids for large hinterland areas. The GEA, Mr. Speaker, intends to continue its collaboration with sister agencies, ministries, the private sector, academia, and communities in advancing its vision and mandate towards a sustainable energy future, ensuring energy access to all Guyanese. Mr. Speaker, power generation entails the development and implementation of energy policies and oversight of the management of power generation establishments to improve the effective and efficient provision of energy services across the country. An estimated total of $3.1 billion has been allocated to power companies across Guyana. $172.5 million for Letem Power Company, $490 million for Kokwani Utilities Incorporated, $2.3 billion for Lynn Mine, the AP and UFC stronghold, $30 million for Mabaruma Power Company, $50 million for Madja Power and Light, 10 million for Moruco Power and Light, 50 million for Matches Ridge Power and Light, and 50 million for Port Kaituma Power and Light. In Guyana, where power generation is concerned, we also acknowledge the increasing demands for power in the advent of our growing oil and gas sector. The Guyana Power and Light, our country's primary power generation agency, requires massive support and investments so that it can strengthen its capacity to serve the increasing demands and, by extension, our people. This, Mr. Speaker, is one of the essential cornerstones for economic and socio-economic developments. Mr. Speaker, GPL is also rolling ahead with its transmission and distribution plan, which essentially targets redundancy, reliability, capacity upgrades, bulk delivery systems to new load centers, and technical loss reduction via larger conductors and power factor correction. The transmission and distribution system would be subjected to continuous expansion, modernization, and the introduction of automation to ultimately realize a smart grid. The ultimate aim is the integration of a fully automated transmission and distribution metering and generation system. This would realize accurate frequency and voltage controls within operating standards and the ability to undertake corrective action automatically, thus reducing outages in the event of permanent network faults. Mr. Speaker, GPL is currently working with a list of known areas and will continue to ensure access to electricity is improved to 100% by 2024. The company plans to stockpile all metering materials in advance of the customer's base expected growth, while acquiring additional meters to address non-technical losses and defects. Mr. Speaker, above all this, customer service remains high on GPL lists as well, while the reliability and the quality of the supply of electricity delivered to customers are of significant importance to the company, which remains cognizant of the nature of electricity and the importance of leveraging information and communication technological initiatives to improve the efficiencies within its operations. Mr. Speaker, there are also plans for a phased transition from automated meter reading technology to automated metering infrastructure technology in order to facilitate on-demand and scheduled remote retrieval of meter readings. Reduction in estimated bills resulting from meter access challenges, voltage level monitoring at customers' premises, detection of unauthorized interference of electric service at the point of the meter, and remote disconnection or reconnection of electric services. Besides the benefits of replacing the regular meters with AMI meters, which will help improve the quality of service and accounting efficiency, the AMI technology will also help identify voltage levels within the distribution network and inform a critical operational standard and performance measure, voltage regulation. With a list of planned projects to improve the power systems in generation and transmission and distribution, the metering plan and the efficiency and customer service improvement initiatives, GPL plans to meet and exceed technical and non-technical operational standard and performance targets outlined in the 2021-2025 Development and Expansion Program. Mr. Speaker, the Power Utility Upgrade Program is designed to support GPL in executing fundamental infrastructure and investment of a corporate development program, which will allow for a culture change that contributes to an organization that can supply energy within minimum international standards. A total estimate of $1.8 billion has been allocated to this project. The main outcomes of this project, Mr. Speaker, are expected to be the reduction of the technical and non-technical losses. The project will also improve the performances of the power distribution network in terms of reliability. Mr. Speaker, in alignment with the LCDS, the PUUP will reinforce the electricity infrastructure by upgrading part of the transmission and distribution network, which contributes to achieving Sustainable Development Goal 9, that is, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. This project will also contribute towards improving Guyana's doing business conditions by making it easier to obtain electricity through better power network performance, and will impact on the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal 8, that is decent work and economic growth, which will be characterized by the country's growth in electricity consumption. The work of the PUUP, Mr. Speaker, will also include identifiable climate mitigation for benefit of reduction of technical losses in the distribution network, an estimated energy saving of 80 gigawatt-hour by 2022. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, this project will contribute to the achievement of the goals of SDG 13, which requires urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Specifically, this project addresses the following aspects of GPL's operation: infrastructural upgrade to decrease technical and commercial losses, reinforcement of infrastructure to improve reliability, institutional strengthening through training and reinforcement of techniques required for efficient management at the executive and senior management levels, operational efficiency through consultancies in system planning, energy demand forecasting, supervisory control, and data acquisition, SCADA, operation and maintenance. Mr. Speaker, the work of the Power Producers and Distribution Agency will also contribute to the overall power generation capacity in Guyana. These works include increasing its generating capacity by 44%, with the inclusion of the new installation of 46.5 megawatt power plant at Garden of Eden. Mr. Speaker, the gensets came into the country in November, but unfortunately the people of Guyana have to wait until the second quarter of 2021 for this project coming on stream, simply due to poor planning by the previous administration. Instead of simultaneous planning, we have to live with the sequential planning approach of the previous administration. Creating additional employment through expansion, supporting government strategies towards alternative sources of energy, including solar power, wind power, liquefied natural gas, and gas-to-shore projects. Providing technical and other support to other energy generating providers, and developing and implementing effective risk management systems and policies to manage current and emerging risks. Interland Electrification Company, Inc., an estimated $202.5 million has been allocated. Mr. Speaker, in 2004, our PPPC government implemented the Unserved Areas Electrification Program, UAEP, the purpose of which was to provide electricity to unserved areas along the coast. Another component under this program also aimed to examine ways in which hinterland areas could have increased access to electricity in the most cost-effective and sustainable manner. At the community level, many of the government institutions were powered by individual solar systems or diesel generators, while about 10% of the communities had a mini grid supplying electricity to mainly community buildings in a central area, with residential buildings within feasible distance from the grid also receiving supply. Mr. Speaker, in 2020, after assuming office, I wish to report that the HECI, by the end of 2020, would have installed a 1,100 kVA generator at Kokwani, a new engine for the 750 kVA generator at Mabaruma, a new 150 kVA generator at Matthews Ridge, a 12 kilowatt solar microgrid in Yarakita Region 1, a 12 kilowatt solar microgrid in Hotokwai Region 1, 10 kilowatt solar microgrid system in Chinawing Region 7, and a 15 kilowatt solar microgrid system in Philippi Region 7. That is 2020. 2021 plans include the completion of the installation of solar microgrids in Monkey Mountain, Akwini, Bethany, Kabakaburi, and Achiwib. Complete installation of the 150 kilowatt hydropower system at Keto, along with the construction of a distribution system. Install new engines for generators at Letem, Madhya, Port Kaituma, and Matthews Ridge. Upgrade the distribution network in Letem. Install solar home system for households in approximately 200 hinterland communities. That is between 25,000 to 30,000 systems. That project will start in 2021. Each system will provide the average household with dusk to dawn lighting, power for the charging of cell phones and laptops, and operating audio equipment for information and entertainment. Further, Mr. Speaker, HECI plans to install solar PV-powered microgrid system in 50 communities by 2025. This has already started, with such system being completed, as mentioned earlier, in 4 communities. The plan, Mr. Speaker, is to upgrade and expand the generation and distribution capacities in communities with existing grids to serve an additional 450 households and businesses, improve generation reliability, and reduce electricity costs throughout our interior, Letem, Madhya, Port Kaituma, Matthews Ridge, by introducing solar farms to reduce reliance on diesel generation. This has already started with solar farm projects being installed in Letem, Madhya, under the IDB-funded program, which is managed by the Guyana Energy Agency. Across all villages, the maintenance of the energy system is essential to ensure optimum performance and to prolong their useful life. Preventative and emergency maintenance activities on the energy systems will be best provided by local residents. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, through HECI, we plan to provide appropriate training for residents, including females, in all of the nearly 200 hinterland communities during the period 2020-2025. Mr. Speaker, all these plans will be able to commence soon for HECI. Mr. Speaker, the importance of information and communication technology, particularly as it relates to its use as a tool of economic and social empowerment, cannot be overemphasized. Investments in ICT have continually increased globally, causing a massive shift in the global economy. Guyana has made many strides in the innovation of ICTs, but there is some way to go, and this creates room for a country to learn and follow the pattern of larger countries' successes in this regard. There's tremendous potential for ICTs to be used for development in all sectors of our country, including health, education, security, infrastructure, agriculture, and social development. Against this backdrop, I wish to remind you, Mr. Speaker, that our government is aware of the need for improved ICT access across the country with an aim to bridge the digital divide currently experienced by our people and enhance their quality of living by giving them more access to information and communication. Mr. Speaker, with an estimated $2 billion allocation for the NDMA over the next 5 years, the NDMA will continue to work to transform the delivery of government services and improve citizen quality of life through appropriate use of technology that fosters digital inclusion and public trust. In 2021, the NDMA will continue to focus on improving the quality of public services to citizens, expanding the reach of government services, and facilitating specialized ICT training to fulfill government needs. This is all geared towards providing increased access to internet and government services irrespective of geographic location or monetary status, and increasing ICT literacy. In 2021, the liberalization of the telecommunications sector and concomitant reduction in the rates offered by service providers will allow NDMA to increase the internet bandwidth provided to government, institutions, and agencies. NDMA will drastically improve its internet availability through the utilization of 2 independent providers. This now provides a redundant path for NDMA internet services. NDMA will aggressively be pursuing a fiber optic cable installation project across the coast to facilitate the expansion and reach of government services and replace the limited capacity of the current wireless option. Interconnecting communication towers will allow more capacity and reliability at locations along the coast. These towers will be used to provide improved access to internet services throughout community hotspots and hubs. NDMA currently provides internet access at over 80 sites in the streets of Georgetown, which are free and openly available to all. NDMA is further expanding its internet access to hinterland and remote locations with plans for more expansion beyond the current installations. Leveraging the existing and new fiber infrastructure in Georgetown, the NDMA will proceed to interconnect secondary schools with fiber, thereby significantly increasing bandwidth availability to improve the delivery of the school's virtual curriculum. Safe City. Safe City, the major deliverable for the Guyana National Broadband Project, will be launched in 2021. It will provide a unified emergency call center service via the command center to the public through one number, 911. The citizens will have a single point of access to the police, fire, and emergency ambulance services via this number. Response times are expected to improve along with the coordination of responding resources. Energy responders will be equipped with modern communication devices that can provide real-time video, voice, and data feedback to the command center, which is built specifically for this purpose. The security and regulation of government information systems are important to encourage confidence in the government services by citizens, businesses, and international partners. It is therefore necessary to ensure that these systems and services are protected from cyber threats. One major deliverable for 2021 is the development of the National Cyber Security Strategy for Guyana. Additionally, in 2021, NDMA will be conducting an assessment to ascertain Guyana's capability to respond to cybersecurity incidents of national significance. Further, NDMA is in the process of developing government-wide cybersecurity policies. NDMA will continue to focus on monitoring and securing the government networks and services, as well as responding to cyber incidents of national importance. Mr.
Such amount we can't use either.
Mr. Speaker, one of the government of Guyana's most significant achievements to date is its ability to bring to close the long-awaited liberalization of the telecommunications sector. A feat completed within 2 months of taking office. The PPPC completed this campaign promise in record time, Mr. Speaker. This single move, which was long overdue and delayed by the previous administration, will create a quantum leap in communications and the way we connect. It will also fast-track the development of the associated technologies, stimulating tremendous social and economic benefits in traditionally dependent sectors by leveraging technology. Within weeks of liberalization and its introduction of a new competitive landscape, Guyana experienced new speeds and services offered by major service providers. Today, Guyana can easily access gigabit internet speeds on par with services offered in the region and the First World. This is a clear example of liberalization enabling rapid development in the country, such as the access to the latest technologies, such as robust fiber optic and fixed 5G services across the most densely populated parts of Guyana. Liberalization has also resulted in a decrease in wholesale prices for bandwidth capacity towards some 80%. This has enabled the NDMA to access quadruple bandwidth capacity, which has strengthened our ability to improve the delivery of services tasked to this agency. Mr. Speaker, only recently in this very House, we experienced the work of the NDMA, being able to increase your bandwidth to facilitate your work. Mr. Speaker, the Office of the Prime Minister has also given our support to the construction of 2 new subsea cables, which will strengthen the resilience of our international connectivity and ensure our sector's preparedness for a rapidly developing economy. The Office of the Prime Minister will also widen its focus from macro services to the empowerment of smaller rural providers to extend connectivity across the country. We have already tasked the Telecommunications Agency to equip these small providers to join us in the mammoth task of providing universal services for all our brothers and sisters countrywide, and especially in the hinterland. This also ties into our recent order that allows for the registration of small internet service providers. This move will contribute to our promise of universal services and stimulate increased economic activity in ICT in these communities. This is a crucial strategy to boost connectivity and ensure there is space for the small ICT business. We will also implement robust policies that advocate for providing services based on modern protocols, including number portability and interconnection standards, and those that support the Public Utilities Commission to conduct its mandate effectively. Mr. Speaker, we believe these initiatives will contribute to drive the sector's progression in favor of increased benefits to the Guyanese people. As an example, Mr. Speaker, number portability, which gives ownership of one's telephone number, to the consumer rather than the provider is a measure that enables the consumer to choose the best service provider for his or her needs without the cost of switching to new numbers. This forces the provider to ensure the best quality and affordability rather than locking in clients who did not wish to change their current number. Mr. Speaker, the Office of the Prime Minister is also currently reviewing its spectrum policy by engaging stakeholders, telecom professionals, and external expertise. We believe that this collaboration will ensure that we are prepared for the 5G revolution that will boost internet connectivity and support the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and so much more that have been associated with advanced 5G services. We're also working to equip the telecom agency with the resources, exposure, and skill set necessary to prepare us for a modern future in telecommunications. Mr. Speaker, in my 2020 budget presentation, I highlighted the increased access to technology resulting in the growing demand by the public for accountability and transparency from their government. All across the world, people are now more empowered and continue to call on those in power to remain transparent and keep them informed. Our PPPC government remains committed to this cause, and provisions under the Government Information and Communication Services Program speaks volume with regard to this commitment. A total of $961.3 million has been allocated for this year's budget towards this area. Mr. Speaker, an estimated $375 million has been allocated to the National Communications Network to carry out its work, programs, and plans. NCN is aiming to become the first network in Guyana to be fully digital while educating, entertaining, inspiring, and using all technological and compatible advancements available. Linden has begun the process with Borbies on the list. The radio stations, postal and regional, have been equipped with the latest broadcast equipment and are almost fully digital. Through the regional radio stations and TV relays, the interior regions of Guyana, particularly regions 1, 7, 8, and 9, and interior communities of regions 2, 6, and 10 are no longer deprived of the opportunity of information sharing and communication with government and economic centers of the coast. NCN enables the provision of access to information, an increasingly important constitutional and human right, Mr. Speaker. Over the next 4 years, NCN will embark on reaching those communities in sub-regions already receiving service, but due to mountainous terrain and lack of electricity, they are unable to receive our signal. NCN will partner with other state agencies like the Guyana Energy Agency to ensure there is a provision of reliable power for these additional facilities. This effort will realize the growth and development of indigenous broadcasters and create employment. Through a satellite link with NCN in Georgetown, these stations will be able to access daily programs from the main national broadcaster in Georgetown, covering news, current affairs, national, cultural, and social events, including sports and entertainment. Live broadcasts from Parliament and key national events, as well as special educational and health programs produced by NCN. NCN intends to remain compliant with the time frame set out in the Persons with Disabilities Act 2012 that makes provisions for the inclusion of sign language or subtitles. Chapter 36, Bureau 5, Section 26, 1 and 2 of the Act stipulates that, and I quote, every national television station shall provide a sign language inset or subtitles in at least one newscast program daily and special programs covering events of national significance. End of quote. Mr. Speaker, NCN will explore forthwith the use of closed captioning and the use of sign language interpreters as part of its social responsibility and will endeavor to be compliant by 2022. It is estimated that 50,000 people comprise Guyana's persons with disabilities population. Of this population, 9.1% or 4,406 people suffer from hearing impediment, 30% or 14,525 persons suffer from visual impairment. NCN will start with sign language or closed captioning during the major newscasts, presidential addresses, and other important public information. And in the coming years, will also strive to present major programs in the indigenous and Creole languages. As NCN strives to expand and diversify both programming and human resource capacity, Mr. Speaker, the agency under the direction of the Minister within the Office of the Prime Minister and Board of Directors anticipate that it will receive technical and programmatic capacity building as outlined by the Department of Public Affairs. Further, the agency will be part of a universal exchange program established through key external, international, bilateral partners and benefit from training of new communication recruits for the state media. NCN already has several noteworthy broadcasters and TV presenters who can be emulated by those now joining the profession. They can hear archive recordings from the early days of Radio Demerara in 1951 to the Guyana Broadcasting Service in 1958 and the Guyana Broadcasting Corporation in 1979 to modern-day NCN in 2021. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister of Public Affairs, a few days ago, in his address to this House, envisages the development of a National Broadcast Academy in collaboration with the Guyana Press Association, Guyana Broadcasting Authority, and the University of Guyana. This initiative will provide the opportunity for young broadcasters to be adequately trained and mentored in all areas of broadcasting. NCN sees itself as being a major contributor and beneficiary in this endeavor over the next 4 years. For 2021 to 2025, NCN will continue to establish itself as the only network in this country that reaches across all regions via television, radio, and social media, and intends to be the first network fully digital, using all technological and compatible advancements available in order to efficiently execute our mandate of promoting the social and human development of the people of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, a total estimate of $310 million allocated to the Department of Public Information will allow for continued access to public information for all our citizens, which is a right enshrined in the Constitution of Guyana. Therefore, as mentioned before, our government, in respect of this constitutional right, is obligated to provide information to the people of Guyana on all matters relating to policy decisions and national plans, programs, and events. Such information is essential to promoting both understanding of all public issues and encouraging meaningful engagement with and involvement of the Guyanese people. In keeping with this obligation, the Department of Public Information is mandated to serve as the public relations arm of the government. It is tasked with ensuring citizens are informed and kept abreast with the work programs, policies, plans, events, and activities of the government. It is also responsible for special productions and coverage of and promotion of national events and initiatives. As such, it is anticipated that the DPI will become the government information agency overseeing the coordination, dissemination, and promulgation of the work of the government through various channels. It will serve as a central coordinating hub for public information and government activities. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, it is envisioned that from 2021 to 2025, the department will be transformed into a rationalized, equipped, and efficient government information unit with optimized national reach. Through staged interventions, it is envisioned that the department will become a leader in the production, creation, and promotion of the government's work. Our government has recognized that there must be greater focus on making government messaging clear, understandable, and easy to obtain. It has been noted that official government information needs to be distinctly and consistently identifiable to minimize instances of confusion on the part of the public and to ensure the message is received in the way it was intended. Mr. Speaker, a total of $563 million has been allocated to the Civil Defense Commission for it to carry out its work. As our country continues to develop and expand, the CDC will be focusing heavily on institutional strengthening within the organization to better position the agency to lead and coordinate disaster risk management across Guyana in a fast-paced and efficient way. Mr. Speaker, I wish to report that from August the 2nd, 2020 to December, the Civil Defense Commission has distributed 42,615 food and sanitation hampers throughout Guyana at a cost of $434.3 million. Of note, Mr. Speaker, is that the CDC wants to legitimize its role and authority in coordinating disaster risk management at all levels through the passage and implementation of the requisite legislation for Guyana. This crucial milestone will necessitate various degrees of capacity and awareness building across the country in order to educate the population on the new regulations and to establish and implement the governance system and roles contained therein. The CDC intends to vastly ramp up its efforts towards education and awareness, therefore, in the areas of disaster risk management, recognizing that awareness is a critical catalyst to drive positive action in reducing risks and building resilience. More importantly, Mr. Speaker, the CDC intends to establish mechanisms for extensive and continuous data gathering on risk and risk reduction impacts in the long and short term, and the accurate analyses and reporting of these against various regional and international targets. The CDC strategic vision for 2021-2025 is to see the enhancement of capacities for preparedness and response at all levels. National oil spill readiness has been prioritized by the agency as one of its focus areas within the coming 5 years, given the new and emerging threats associated with this developing industry. Mr. Speaker, health, agriculture, natural resources, finance, education, and infrastructure have been identified as the priority sectors for disaster risk management institutional strengthening during 2021-2025. And the CDC, therefore, will support these sectors in the development of sector-specific plans. Mr. Speaker, while much has been said about what our government plans to do, we must also consider all that has already been done by our administration, particularly within such a short time frame and under political and economic constraints. Within the first 100 days of our government taking office, our country and our people saw a massive shift as we aim to urgently deliver and bring immediate relief to the people. Our government took charge of the health crisis in this country. Procuring medical supplies and delivering much needed relief to our citizens amid the coronavirus pandemic. When we took over, we only had 4 ventilators in this country. Today we have 25 ventilators. We had lockdown and 21 tests being done per day. Today we have no lockdown, over 2,000 tests being done, and protection of the lives and economic livelihood of the people. Let me repeat for you. Our government took charge of the health crisis in this country, procuring medical supplies and delivering much-needed relief to our citizens amid the coronavirus pandemic. Our government strived to reduce the strains that weighed on our economy and rebuild significant interest in investments in our country. Mr. Speaker, our PPPC government has been working arduously to restore hope in the lives of our people, our citizens, rebuild trust and confidence, and uplift our people in a manner that they can realize true prosperity in all aspects of life. This is important, Mr. Speaker, and I wish to submit electronically what I'm going to read now. After forming the government on the 2nd of August 2020, it was quite revealing, and many of what I'm going to reveal now is captured in our daily papers. Guyana Times, 6th of August, infectious disease hospital, a total disaster. Guyana Times, the 9th of August 2020, APNU, AFC, left GFC, that's the Guyana Forestry Commission, bankrupt, unable to pay staff millions in debt. Stabroek News, the 10th of August 2020, Director of Parks, Larry London, was getting huge salary and benefits. Hardly lived in country. Hardly live in country in Guyana. Kaichur News, the 16th of August 2020, woman who filed the Recount Challenge, given 7.5 million contract in June 2020 by APNU AFC. Comment to that one. Guyana Times, 17th of August 2020, Carol Joseph was paid as petroleum advisor. Other posts under APNU AFC government. Guyana Times, the 24th of August 2020, APNU AFC owes NCN $16 million for campaign ads. Mr. Speaker, until this date, it has not been paid up. Stabroek News, the 24th of August, update. I need to be guided here, Mr. Speaker. I should say Christopher, arrested as cops remove barbershop equipment. Publication, Guyana Times, the 23rd of August, 2020. You said it was boring. APNU AFC government spent over $60 million from taxpayers to retain private lawyers. Stabroek News, the 16th of September 2020. Region 6 health sector was plagued by mismanagement under APNU AFC. Says veterinary anesthetic machine was bought for hospital. Something for animals, bought for humans. 18th of September 2020, APNU AFC left broken healthcare system to address pandemic. The 22nd of September 2020, Stabroek News, Larry London contract for board certificates raises eyebrows. Kaichur News, the 22nd of September 2020, asphalt plant racket uncovered. Kaichur News, 23rd of September 2020, government launch investigation into asphalt plant racket. Demerara Harbor Bridge Management distances itself from allegations. Kaichur News, the 24th of September 2020, Lands and Survey boss Trevor Ben bought 25 million Prado for 2.5 million from his own workplace. Kaichur News, the 30th of September 2020, Christopher Jones gifted state lands twice.
Honorable Member Christopher Jones, Honorable Member
Christopher Jones, Mr. Speaker, gifted state lands twice. Trevor Ben waived land fees. Barbershop scandal.
Honorable Prime Minister, you'll have to wind down.
Guyana Times, the 8th of October 2020, 170 billion spent by APNU AFC in capital funds cannot be fully accounted for. And this is from the Accountant General. Chronicle newspaper, the 14th of October 2020, Sarah dismantled, director, deputy, and staff fired. They appointed themselves, right? 25th of October 2020, iNews Guyana, massive land conspiracy connected to Ogle Diamond Bypass project unearthed. Prime land leased to shell companies under APNU AFC flipped for profit. Chronicle newspaper, the 28th of October 2020, APNU lawyer implicated in land scandal. Police so coup to investigate transactions. Starbrook News, the 4th of November 2020, land corruption. Guyana Times, the 7th of November 2020, Ganesh Mahipal, Honorable Ganesh Mahipal, absent from work for 33 days, divulged confidential information.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. We need to conclude.
Guyana Times, 10th of November 2020, bombshell revelations. A chronicle of nepotism, corrupt practices, wanton spending by APNU AFC. 100 days of discoveries. Starbrook News, the 29th of November 2020, millions of unaccounted for from SLED initiative. Starbrook News, the 30th of November 2020, US $1 million deposited.
Honorable Prime Minister, you'll have to conclude.
I'm concluding, Mr. Speaker. For bond was not red flag. Starbrook News, Mustafa, Honorable Mustafa, hold on 1 million in D&I contracts, asks AG to probe after massive unapproved variations. Mr. Speaker, the list can go on and on, but it's important that I mention that in order to mention that what is certain is that our people all across this country now have a government that is serving in their best interests, and we will continue to do so. As our president, my colleague ministers and I travel to communities in all regions, all 10 regions. We see, feel, and hear about the relief that people now enjoy as a result of all the measures our PPPC government has put in place so far. The changes in people's lives in the past 6 months of a change of government has restored hope, and our people now look forward with great confidence to enjoying a bright future for themselves and their loved ones. Mr. Speaker, our PPPC government is a working government. We work not only in the office behind closed doors flipping papers all day long, we get up and we get out in the fields to meet with the people. We serve so that when we come here to this house, we truly represent what the people want, and the decisions we make here do not take away, but add and improve the lives of our people, because their voices are finally heard with our PPPC government. Mr. Speaker, many communities that I visited since I
Mr.
became
Prime Minister, I don't want to cut your mic.
2 minutes, Mr. Speaker. Many communities
2 minutes would be 2 minutes too long.
Many communities that I visit, Mr. Speaker, has told me that this is the first time in 5 years they have seen a Prime Minister and a Minister of Government. Mr. Speaker, our government, President Ali, myself, all our ministers are accessible to all of our people. Our doors remain open, and we will continue our work in that manner. And for those who don't come to us, we will come to you because we are for all Guyanese. Development for all Guyana in keeping with our motto, One Guyana. Mr. Speaker, the presentations made by myself and colleagues in defense of the allocations in Budget 2021 have all flawlessly illustrated how our government programs and plans for every area and sector will undoubtedly contribute to restoration. The new day for Guyana and all Guyanese has finally come. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. Thank you very much. Honorable members, we are going to take the Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance, and then we'll take the resolution from the Business Subcommittee and the Committee of Supply, and that will conclude our business for today. Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance, it's my honor to call on you to conclude the debate. Honorable Minister, you may proceed, and I am starting the clock running at 4:59.25.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my mother, like so many other Guyanese mothers, is an incredibly strong woman. And throughout my entire life, I've never seen her daunted or flinched by any circumstance. Even in the face of the greatest adversity, she would reassure me and my siblings, and in more recent years, her grandchildren, that no challenge is unsurmountable, and that everything happens for a reason. You might ask, Mr. Speaker, why I begin my presentation with this reference. I do so, sir, because the lesson that everything happens for a reason is one that I have held close and dear throughout my adult consciousness. And I make this particular reference at this time because I've seen a lot of questions asked about the quality of the debate over the last 5 days, and criticisms expressed about things said on both sides. But I believe very strongly, sir, that the past 5 days, were a very important 5 days for this country. Those 5 days happened for a very good reason. Indeed, in equal measure, sir, I've seen a lot of questions asked. We've all seen questions asked about the last 5 years. And I do believe equally the last 5 years also happened for a very important reason. And in exactly the same measure, there's been a lot of debate about why our country had to experience the trauma that we experienced from the 2nd of March to the 2nd of August. I believe, sir, that history and the passage of time will demonstrate to us with abundance that those months between March and August 2020 also happened for an extremely good reason. The bottom line, sir, is that the last 5 years, and indeed the period from March 2nd to August 2nd, and furthermore, the last 5 days, long and arduous though they might have seemed at times, provided the Guyanese people and the world at large how morally bankrupt, technically inept, and insincere the APNU AFC is. And most importantly, sir, those 3 periods demonstrated amply, reminded the Guyanese people successively, the last 5 years, March to August, and the last 5 days, demonstrated to the Guyanese people how much the APNU AFC is disrespectful of the intelligence of the people they profess to represent. I listened, sir, very keenly to the presentation made by the Honorable Leader of the Opposition earlier today. And I must, first of all, thank him for the graciousness of the welcome that he extended to me on my return to Guyana and to this Honorable House. It would not have escaped his notice that his graciousness in that regard was not necessarily reflected across the contributions by those whom he leads in his house. The Leader of the Opposition made a number of important points, and I believe very deliberately adopted a stance intended to convey an impression of magnanimity in some instances, statesmanlikeness in some instances. But it would be remiss of me if I were not to identify a few of the issues that he raised, just to illustrate the point that I'm making, that notwithstanding the pronouncements made by the distinguished Leader of the Opposition, the actions of the APNU AFC in this House and outside of this House are in fact starkly in contrast with the stance that he attempted to adopt today. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition spoke of the fact that the APNU-AFC is ready to work together for national development. As he said, the APNU-AFC is ready to act, ready to engage. Mr. Speaker, I contrast that statement with the invitation extended by His Excellency the President to former President Granger to meet at a forum of former presidents, which this was a meeting of former presidents, which despite the public pronouncements of how willing they are to engage and how eager they are to be consulted, a meeting of former presidents, an invitation by His Excellency the President to a meeting of former presidents was spurned by former President Granger. The opposition leader spoke, again, in a feigned tone of magnanimity about willingness to engage, trying to convey an impression of civility. But yet, sir, when His Excellency the President came on the 11th of February to address this very House in his inaugural address, not only did the APNU-AFC absent themselves from that sitting, but engaged in raucous behavior, raucous and vulgar behavior outside of this chamber, and outside of this compound. And so, sir, it is very easy to stand and say all sorts of things to try to convey an impression of what you are. But the reality, sir, indicates a very different truth. But you know, sir, what it discloses, in fact, sir, is that the APNU-AFC has no respect for the intelligence of the Guyanese people. They believe, and some of them said it. The honorable member, Mr. Ramjatan, spoke about somebody speaking to the gullible supporters. The Guyanese people are not gullible, sir. We don't believe that any Guyanese person is gullible. The Guyanese people are in fact far more sophisticated and far more intelligent than you might believe. So stop saying, and it was said, the record will reflect it. The record will reflect it. Well, of course, on the bloodsucker comment. Instead of standing here and saying all sorts of things that are intended to insult the intelligence of the Guyanese people, when people were watching with their very eyes, their own eyes, you don't think the Guyanese people were watching over the last 5 years? You don't think the Guyanese people were watching from May to August? Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition took great umbrage and devoted a significant part of his presentation to this question of democracy and the events of 2020 and the question of rigging of elections. He devoted a significant part of his presentation to this question. And he said that the accusation that the APNU-AFC attempted to stall democracy in 2020 is a big joke. It didn't happen. Sir, the world was watching. The world was watching, sir. And the world saw not only the events of March to August, but the world had an opportunity now to cast its collective mind back to the entire journey that led to March 2020. And I'm going to come back to that journey in a minute. But on the specific question of the role of the APNU-AFC in stalling of democracy, if the APNU-AFC were to be believed, we would all doubt our eyes. Did we actually see that in one moment the APNU-AFC agreed to a recount, but in another moment one of their candidates went to court to stop the recount? Was this something that I was imagining from Dubai or wherever it was that I'm supposed to have been? Did the world imagine that the APNU-AFC agreed to a recount, invited CARICOM observers to come back, and then deployed one of their own candidates to go to court to try to stop the recount, as the CARICOM observers were arriving at the airport? But the leader of the opposition and our friends on that side of the house will have us believe that they never made any attempt to stall democracy. It never happened. Never happened. That court action that was filed is a figment of our imagination. It never happened. And that is not counting the fact that some of these people were apparently on the payroll of the government. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition would have us believe that we all imagined when the Carter Center was told, you cannot come back to Guyana. Can you imagine, sir, saying to the Carter Center, we are not permitting you to come back to observe the elections, in the recount in Guyana? Barring international observers from coming back to observe the recount. Did we imagine that? Did we imagine that? Oh my goodness, look who is speaking about Judas. Look who is speaking about Judas. Mr. Nimakaram himself. Mr. Nimakaram, is he the junior Nimakaram? Is the rubber stamp the senior Nimakaram?
Honorable Minister, remember you speak to me, and then secondly,
my apologies.
The language of the Parliament is English.
Mr. Speaker, did we imagine these things? Do we remember, sir, that the CARICOM observers were brought in by a special flight and were waiting to observe the recount, as were representatives of all of the parties, only to be told the convention center had suddenly to be fumigated? Did we imagine that? Did the people of Guyana imagine that? And so, Mr. Speaker, I say, sir, to the opposition leader, it's okay to come and adopt this nice, magnanimous, statesman-like tone, but stop insulting the intelligence of the Guyanese people. They did not imagine all of those things. The fact of the matter is that the APNU-AFC were involved in an elaborate scheme to subvert democracy in 2020. But sir, that scheme did not start in 2020. That scheme did not start in 2020, sir. Mr. Speaker, it is well known. It is well known, sir, that Mr. Speaker, as we all looked, Mr. Speaker, as we all looked at the events of the last 5 years, when we look back, a lot of things that did not make sense at the time, with hindsight, make a lot of sense. So let us look back, sir. Mr. Speaker, as I have said on a previous occasion in this House, 3 lists of 6 upstanding Guyanese citizens were proposed to the Leader of the Opposition following a standard formula that has been in place since 1992. 3 lists of 6 each, 18 fine upstanding Guyanese citizens. Mr. Speaker, all 18 of them were rejected as being, and I'm glad to hear the APNU AFC MP maintain the position, rightfully so. They are still citizens of Guyana, sir. They are watching you and listening to you too. They are watching and listening to you too. 18 upstanding Guyanese citizens were cast aside as being not fit and proper and therefore unsuitable to be appointed chairman of GCOB. At the time, the reason wasn't perhaps to everybody completely obvious. We thought maybe it was just momentary madness, momentary disrespect for these 18 people. Sir, and then, in violation of the Constitution, a unilateral appointment was made. That unilateral appointment, sir, as we all know, would subsequently be struck down by the highest court of our land, the Caribbean Court of Justice, as unconstitutional, and rightfully so. You may ask yourself, at the time, sir, a lot of people didn't really understand the significance of that move. They didn't understand, but the pieces were being put in place. The pieces were being put in place. Mr. Speaker, and then we saw the manner in which the APNU AFC, they stand up here now when they talk about public service. The Honourable Member, Ms. Cathy Hughes, stood up and spoke about what has happened to public service in Guyana. What has happened to public service in Guyana? She spoke so eloquently about it. Mr. Speaker, the APNU AFC, from the first day they assumed office, set about on a rampage of political persecution against their opponents. A rampage, including people who had given a lifetime of public service. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to speak about my own example. I'll put myself aside for the moment. I will put myself aside for the moment. I will offer an even more compelling example. That's correct. Mr. Speaker, I don't believe that there's anybody in this country who would dare to think of Dr. Roger Forbes' luncheon with anything but the highest of respect. It has been captured on video for posterity. Police being deployed on political instruction and turning up at the office of the Leader of the Opposition to say to Dr. Roger Luncheon, "Sir, we have been instructed to come to place you under arrest." Dr. Roger Luncheon, a man who has devoted his entire life to public service in this country, a a man who has always served the people of this country with impeccable integrity, more than any of you could ever dream of mustering. Mr. Speaker,
I agree where I am concerned, but the honorable members is something else. So please, you should be the honorable.
The honorable members, of course. Mr. Speaker, the entire world watched with horror. The entire world watched with horror and pain, and many people with tears in their eyes, as Roger Luncheon was manhandled in that manner. And then you dare to come here. The honorable members dare to come here and speak about what has happened to public service. The APNU AFC lowered the tone of political engagement in this country to its lowest level ever during the period 2015 to 2020. I served in 2 previous parliaments, sir, and never before did I hear such personal insults hurled at us on this side from those on that side. Never! And so, sir, to come now and to stand and to say what has happened to public service, when in fact such lasting damage was done to the political climate in this country by the behavior of the dictatorial APNU AFC government of 2015 to 2020. Shame on you! Shame on you! I haven't given my example as yet. That's going to be spoken of at the appropriate time. I've given an even more compelling example. My example is going to be given on another occasion. You want to talk about my example? Mr. Speaker, the honorable member wants me to speak about my example. It is a well-known fact, sir. It is a well-known fact, sir, that the APNU AFC government spent hundreds of millions of dollars doing audits high, low, left, right, center, searching everywhere, found not a scintilla of wrongdoing on my part, and then trumped up charges. But I want to finish the story. Trumped up charges. Sir, I came back to Guyana to face those charges. Voluntarily, sir. I came back to face those charges. And I attended court, as any law-abiding and respectful citizen would do. I'm not going to get into the legal merits of the case. The fact of the matter is, sir, let them say to the people what my wrongdoing was. Let them say to the people what my, let them say to the people what my wrongdoing was. Unlike some of you over there who were busy.
Mr. Honorable members, if you want to call their parties a different story.
Very well, sir. Unlike honorable members over there who were busy.
The Deputy Speaker included?
Deputy Speaker excluded, sir.
Always excluded. Always.
Who were busy enriching yourselves at the expense of the public purse. Whether it is using public money to buy bangles and bracelets, whether it is contracting your own company to do business. I hear some talk about Video Mega, all this sanctimonious stand up and pretending to be decent. Sir, I didn't sell any land to myself. I didn't sell any land without public tender or without going to cabinet and get cabinet approval. Having gone through a fully transparent process and acting on the instruction of cabinet, sir, the APNU AFC government, knowing fully well that my integrity was unchallengeable, trumped up charges and brought me back to this country. But I'll tell you what, this story is going somewhere. It's going somewhere. Sir, I attended court. And after the court proceedings were finished, sir, after the court proceedings were finished, and I'm saying this because I want to put it in the public record. After the proceedings were finished, the court finished, I voluntarily get on a plane, buy a plane ticket, pay thousands of dollars to buy this plane ticket, to come back to Guyana to attend court. Voluntarily walk into the court, attended the court proceedings. Court proceedings finished, sir. I was then conveyed down the prisoner's chute. And as I went down the prisoner's chute, sir, there was a long line of policemen. Sir, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating, sir. Sir, every single policeman standing there, without exception, apologized to me. And several of them said, sir, we want to say that we're very sorry to have to put you through this, but please understand that we were instructed politically to do it.
Wicked.
And sir, I will tell you this. In that moment, my faith in the inherent decency of the Guyanese people was restored. Sir, that dictatorial APNU AFC government, I didn't give Guyana nearly as much service as Dr. Roger Luncheon, but I think I've given Guyana a fair bit of service. That dictatorial APNU AFC government, after I came back voluntarily to appear in court, then instructed the policemen to put me in handcuffs and parade me there so that they can take a picture and put it on the front pages of the newspaper. And you dare to come and talk about decency? You dare to talk, the honorable members dare to talk about public service? Mr. Speaker, they believe, sir, that I would somehow have been humiliated or cowed by that. They believe that I would somehow have been humiliated or cowed by that. Sir, I wore those handcuffs as a badge of honor. And I said silently to myself, sir, that I will devote the rest of my life to keep these hoodlums out of government forever.
You would have to withdraw that one.
I said, I do withdraw it, sir. And I said in that moment, I will withdraw it, sir, and reformulate it with your permission. In that instant, I will repeat it for emphasis. I wore the handcuffs placed on my wrists by the APNU AFC dictatorship. I wore those handcuffs with pride. And in that instant, I swore to myself that I will devote the rest of my life to ensuring that the APNU AFC is removed from government and never returns to government ever again. You thought that you would cow me or humiliate me? There's nothing that the APNU AFC can do to challenge my integrity, unlike some of the members on that side of the House. Honorable, as some people said, honorable by parliamentary convention. Sir, but I'll tell you what, I was not the only one, sir. Just as I said to myself, I will spend the rest of my life to make sure these people get removed from government. Mr. Speaker, thousands and thousands and thousands of Guyanese people made the same decision. Thousands said, you know what? Maybe we were fooled in 2015, but we ain't making the same mistake again in 2020. So you talk, they like to jump up, Mr. Speaker, they talk about decency, and they talk about integrity. Oh yeah, what the green banners used to say? Honesty, you had banners everywhere. Honesty, decency, and integrity. Honesty, decency, and integrity. Sir, how ironic, how ironic. How ironic, sir. They come, sir, and they want to pretend to be such decent people. I didn't want to mention the, I would leave that to others. Sir, the honorable members on that side of the House, Deputy Speaker accepted, of course, would come here and speak of how decent they are. I sat in horror, sir. One of the paragons, one of the self-appointed paragons of decency over there, self-appointed paragons of decency. Would that be an appropriate expression? One of the self-appointed paragons of decency, sir, the honorable member Cathy Hughes, stood up there. You know, she likes to project herself. The honorable member likes to project herself as some kind of moral compass, moral kind of whatever the words fail me now. And I listened, sir, with horror as this paragon of decency worked through the entire cabinet. She started with Frank Anthony Children. Sir, this is the paragon of decency.
Frank.
The honorable member. Sir, the honorable member Cathy Hughes, the self-appointed paragon of decency on the APNU AFC benches, started first with Frank Anthony's children. The honorable member Frank Anthony, Honorable Minister Frank Anthony. Sir, Honorable Minister Anthony's children need no defense from me or from anybody else. They are Guyana scholars. Two of Guyana's most brilliant daughters of the current generation. But moreover, they are two young Guyanese girls. Brilliant young Guyanese young ladies. The paragon, and of course, if you listen to the honorable member, she is the defender of women, defender of all things that are decent, but has no shame, trying to impugn the integrity of two of Guyana's brightest young women. But not satisfied with that, sir. Not satisfied with that. She then moves on to Honorable Minister Manik Chan's children. Oh, you missed that. She then moved on and brought into the debate Minister Manik Chan's children. Minister Manik Chan's children are babies. They are babies. Bringing them into the debate. And then, sir, not satisfied with that, went on to former President Ramotar's son. Former President Ramotar's son. Making an almost clean sweep. But mind you, the honorable member would present herself as the defender of family values and family virtues and decency and speaks nicely and so on. But has no shame coming here to bring people's children, to bring people's innocent children into the debate. And so, Mr. Speaker, I make this point really to say that the Guyanese people have been watching and paying attention. The Guyanese people have been watching and paying attention. They were watching and paying attention for the last 5 years. They were watching and paying attention for the 5 months last year, and they've been watching and paying attention to the last 5 days. So don't panic. Mr. Speaker, when I read these articles and I hear this commentary about people, as a matter of fact, sir, the last five days, long and arduous as they might have seemed, were in fact extremely informative and instructive and enlightening. They displayed to the Guyanese people and reminded the Guyanese people of the true and deceptive nature of this APNU AFC assortment. And you know, I say assortment because they are a disjointed assortment. They couldn't make up their minds over the 5 days. Some of them said the budget was a copy of their policies. Others said the budget is rubbish. Well, I don't know when you put the two together what they really meant. But you heard all sorts of random noises, disjointed, like I said, inconsistent with each other, and perhaps it might be a leadership problem. But I'm going to say this. I think, Mr. Speaker, that there are a few main points that I would like to make as I conclude this budget debate. First of all, sir, I want to say definitively that the people of Guyana are well aware that the APNU AFC coalition does not have the moral authority to serve as credible representatives of anybody in this house. Anybody. Not even, and you know, it's really unfortunate because 47% of the Guyanese people, is it 47? Thereabouts. It's really unfortunate, sir, because the truth is, but certainly not after the last 5 days, not to mention the 5 months last year. But sir, the truth is that the 47% of the Guyanese people that they profess to represent really do deserve better. Really do deserve better. Mr. Speaker, the moral bankruptcy of the APNU AFC is illustrated not only by their failure to implement their own manifesto promises, but also by the consistent acts of policy deception, repeatedly saying that they were cutting taxes when in fact they were collecting more taxes and imposing more taxes, saying in one breath that they are reducing taxes, but in fact slapping taxes on electricity, on water, on medical supplies, on education services, on construction materials, on health services, on heavy equipment and machinery. And then Mr. Speaker, the people of Guyana were getting their electricity bills. They could see the VAT on the electricity bill. But the government said, we ain't put on no new tax. Stop insulting the intelligence of the people. Come on. Mr. Speaker, they keep professing their own integrity, but the people of Guyana can see. This morning or yesterday morning, we woke up to stories of the Honorable Cathy Hughes contracting her own company. And I will tell you what, those documents that have been disclosed relate to the Ministry of Telecommunications. If you look more widely across government, you will be shocked to see how much business that company was getting across government. But they think people don't know. They think people are stupid. The land grab, sir. They believe that people don't know, but at the appropriate time, these things will be disclosed. They like to talk about Pradoville 1 and Pradoville 2. Sir, if you count up how many of them were busy grabbing, you know why they were holding on to power between March and August? You know how many of them get land between March and August? Sir, when the facts are disclosed, it will be discovered.
You've lost me. I don't know who they were.
Well, sir, when the facts are disclosed at the appropriate time and the charges are laid, you will see, in fact, they talk about Pradoville 1 or 2. They were busy establishing, I don't know what to call it, perhaps Riggsville, because the riggers were there. They were busy establishing a Rigorsville, populated by themselves and their family. They think people don't know. They think people don't know. They were busy, sir, creating a Rigorsville where I don't want to talk about anybody's children, sir. I don't want to talk about anybody's children. So I'm not going to do that. But they were busy establishing a Rigorsville, giving themselves, and they believe people don't know, sir. They come here, what was the phrase used? Sanctimonious?
You can't use gangster.
My apologies, sir.
You can't use the G word.
Oh, no. It wasn't
And please, it's the honorable members or comrade, that's the SOs.
Certainly, sir. Well, I wouldn't start with the firearm licenses, as admonished by the Attorney General. Mr. Speaker, but this pattern of deception that was set out over the last 5 years, they think that people don't know these things. Guyana is a small place. Mr. Speaker, this pattern of deception that was set out over the last 5 years actually manifested itself again over the last 5 days. Sir, I didn't want to descend into the puerile. You think I shouldn't? Sir, the litany of untruths and misrepresentations in full view of the world at large. Sir, they started out, I think their first speaker placed her trump card. You know what her trump card was? Oh, well, yes, of course, that one. There was one that I took a little bit more personally. Her trump card, putting aside the rant, the race-based rant, her trump card, her pièce de résistance, was that the finance minister didn't thank his staff. Sir, that was like the trump card. She said it like she was delivering a knockout punch. It was the honorable member, Anand Prasad, spoke about floating like a butterfly and stinging like a bee. The honorable member, which we all know is a boxing reference, a reference to the man who, Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali. The honorable member, Amanza Walton Desir, stood up, and delivered what clearly she felt was her punch, her knockout punch, that the finance minister didn't thank his staff. Sir, not only was it on video and captured in a Hansard, for permanent, the Hansard is the official record of what the proceedings of this House are. Knowing fully well that this was not true, after the user caused to be circulated the official record, they're still repeating it. And you know what, sir? What's the motive? They want to somehow say to my staff that I didn't thank my staff. They are so simple-minded, sir. Mr. Speaker, I almost born and grew up in the Ministry of Finance, right? Some of them were still running around in their short pants when I was already working in the Ministry of Finance. These people who comprise my family, the staff of the Ministry of Finance are my family. I have been in the Ministry of Finance for 20 years, 2001 to now. I don't believe that there's anybody who got married when I was around and in the country whose wedding I didn't go to. I don't believe there's anybody working in the ministry whose child would visit the ministry and they won't bring their child upstairs to see me, or I won't go downstairs to meet their child and gaff with their child. If their parents ain't feeling good, they can come and tell me their father ain't feeling good. And I'm going to stay in touch with them and they're going to keep me. But these people are my family, sir. To be so simple-minded to come here and parrot this thing like somehow Ashni Singh, the staff of the Ministry of Finance, will think, oh my goodness, the APNU AFC is so good to us. Yeah, she was reading. She was reading faithfully. Most of them read very faithfully. It was comical, sir. But there were other things. And I'm making this point really just to say how simple. I mean, I suppose if you're simple-minded, you kind of assume that the whole world is simple-minded too. So you kind of assume that, well, everybody's stupid. They're going to believe any stupidness we tell them. And I repeat again, don't insult the intelligence of the Guyanese people. Do not insult the intelligence of the Guyanese people. You thought you could have done it from 2015 and 2020, and they put you in your place. All sorts of misrepresentations. All sorts of misrepresentations. The budget had no provision for COVID vaccines. The budget is projecting a... Sir, I want to relate a story. I want to relate a true story. Oh yes, it was... No, eye water. Ironies and eye water. Sir, one of the more defining and depressing moments over the past week, for me, took place last Friday evening. Because I am not like members on that side of the House, and I take great pride in that. And I really do believe that young MPs, irrespective of which side they're sitting on, should be encouraged and should be given an opportunity to grow and develop. I will not name the Member of Parliament concerned. But sir, there's a certain Member of Parliament, a young Member of Parliament, on that side of the House, who spoke very well, stood up at the podium and spoke very eloquently, with a very credible face, and spoke on matters related to the economy. Pronounced, and I'm going to quote, I asked to get the verbatim transcript. She said, sir, the PPP comes with some illogical source of confidence to proudly proclaim that it is their hope and ambition to deliver non-oil GDP. This is the part that caught my attention. To deliver non-oil GDP in 2021 that will be smaller than that of non-oil GDP that was under the coalition in 2019. She went on. That was what was presented in the budget that was presented in this House. This, Mr. Speaker, is GDP facts. This, Mr. Speaker, is GDP facts. She went on. She said the PPP, I just disclosed her gender, although I said I wouldn't disclose the identity of the PPP. Well, the Member of Parliament went on and said the PPP has the audacity to beat their chests and boast about the ambition to deliver 3 years of economic stagnation. Mr. Speaker, when I heard this, it worried me. I thought perhaps that the printer's devil had gotten the better of my staff's excellent work, the same staff that they claim they like so much and they thank him so much, and who I know worked very hard and very diligently on this speech. I thought for a moment, because I don't sit down and make up these numbers, sir. There are experts. When you talk about national accounts and GDP, this is not something you put your finger in the air and you feel where the wind is blowing and you pluck a number out of thin air. There are people who actually understand the compilation of national accounts, who understand how you calculate value added in the economy, who understand how you measure real growth in the economy. Those very public servants who I call my family and who I regard as my family, and who the APNU AFC profess so much to be grateful to. Sir, this thing bothered me. I thought perhaps that the printer's devil had gotten the better of the excellent work that my staff had done. I summoned a meeting of my staff and I said, look, I heard this thing. Did somehow an incorrect number get printed in the tables or in the text? Or can you check it back for me? They checked, sir, and they came back. I don't want to use the language. They are professional public servants. I don't want to use the language that they use. Like I said, they're my family, so they speak freely. Suffice it to say, sir, that they were unable to establish the basis for the statement. But the thing was still on my mind. So last Friday evening, I happened to be on the corridor outside. And I asked one of these Parliament office staff to please pass a message to the MP to say that if he would be kind enough, I'd be happy to have a brief word with her. She very graciously consented. And so on the corridor, she was walking by, she stopped and she spoke. And I said to her that I heard that you made this statement, and I'm trying to understand what is the basis for the statement. So she said, which statement? I said, you said that we are projecting lower GDP.
But, Honorable Minister, I had to caution another speaker with a reference to a conversation with Minister Crowell. So I would want to say let's leave that to other persons.
So you'd prefer, sir, if I
She's
don't...
not here to defend and to deny.
But she should be here, sir. She's a member of the House.
That's why you have a speaker to help to protect everyone. Remember, I circulated your verbatim conclusion.
Very well, sir. Very well, sir. I wrestled with this matter. I will be guided by you, sir, because I wrestled with this matter. I'm not going to go further with the conversation, but suffice it to say, sir, that she herself was incapable of explaining to me what she was saying. I will only leave it at that. I wouldn't go further and say what else she said to me. She was completely incapable. She had no clue what she was talking about. She had no clue. And had no difficulty standing up and saying it, knowing fully well that it had no basis in fact. But I would be guided by you, sir. I wrestled with this matter. I didn't want to. I would be guided by your better judgment on this matter.
And my better judgment says you have about 7 minutes to conclude.
Very good. And so, sir, I want, perhaps on that note, to move on to yet another example. The APNU AFC, sir, would have us believe that they, amongst the several things that they kept going on about was salary increases for public servants. Somehow trying to convey the impression that the budget 2021 had nothing for public servants. Sir, I would like to make the following points. I invite any member of the public to examine the budget speeches for 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019, the last 4 budget speeches presented by the APNU AFC. On every instance, those budget speeches, I'm choosing my words carefully, budget speech for 2016 reported historically what salary increase had been awarded historically, but gave no indication in the speech what salary increase will be awarded for 2016 or in 2016. The same was the case in 2017. The same was the case in 2018. The same was the case in 2019. None of those budget speeches, 16, 17, 18, 19, none of them. They all indicated what the increase had been awarded for the previous year, or the preceding year, or the ensuing year. None of them indicated what the budgeted increase for the next year was, not one of them. And I invite anybody to examine the budget speeches for 16, 17, 18, and 19 and prove otherwise. But sir, they come here and they try to create the impression that somehow the budget speech, they know full well, they and their surrogates speaking out there know full well that it is a well-established convention that the budget speech does not announce what salary increase will be awarded in the coming year. But I want to speak also about this business about public servants, because they come and they profess that how much they did for public servants and the people of Guyana. Sir, I want to give you a small illustration of what the APNU AFC government did to public servants. And they believe, again, that people are naive or stupid. Sir, for this purpose, let us imagine a hypothetical family. A family comprising perhaps a couple, a husband and a wife, maybe, let us say, hypothetically, a policeman and perhaps a teacher, living maybe on the lower flat of the family house. Let us say maybe the wife's father lives upstairs. He's a pensioner, he's a retired public officer. And his son, let us say he's a doctor in the public health care system. So this family comprises the patriarch of the family and his son, who is a medical doctor in the public health care system. And downstairs, the lower flat of the house is occupied by the daughter and her husband, a teacher and a policeman, and their 3 children. Mr. Speaker, this is a family like our family. Many of us can relate to that. That is our family. Or it's a relative of ours, or a neighbor of ours. All of us either belong to a family like that, or we know a family like that, or many families. Sir, first of all, they promised all of the public officers in that house, the doctor, the teacher, the nurse, the policeman. In their manifesto, they promised a 20% salary increase and never delivered it. That's the first point. Secondly, sir, they then decided that they were going to compel public servants, including the doctor, who were on the fixed establishment. They issued a circular to say, not who were on the fixed establishment, who were a contracted employee, or who were contracted employees. They issued a circular to these very public servants that they now profess to have, whose cause they profess to have championed. They issued a circular to those very public officers and said, as long as you're under the age of 45, we are compelling you to move from contracted status to fixed establishment. Sir, you know what that did immediately? To that doctor upstairs who was a contracted employee, immediately his earnings went down by 22.5%. Because he used to get a 22.5% gratuity every 6 months. He wanted to be on contract gratuity terms because he's a young man. He just graduated as a doctor. He doesn't know if he's going to be in the public service until 55, until he's going to get a pension. He wants to be a contracted employee because he wants to get his gratuity now so that he can save up, so that he can apply for a low-income house lot or a middle-income house lot, so that he can build a house, so that he can start a family of his own. He wanted to be a contracted employee to get his gratuity. This APNU AFC government that come now and want to beat their chests and profess to have championed the cause of public officers said and compelled nearly 8,000 such employees that we're taking away 22.5% of your earnings. We're compelling you to go to the fixed establishment. And if you leave the public service before age 55, tough luck. Tough luck. Sir, that's a 22.5% reduction in immediate earnings. But that is not all. That's not all. They issued another circular that said that we are compelling you to take your leave. And if you don't take your leave will be forfeited because we are no longer paying salary in lieu of leave. Now, sir, we historically, of course, we would tend to encourage people to take their leave because they need to rest and renew and rejuvenate and come back. But oftentimes, sir, many of our public servants, as we all know, are working in environments where perhaps are understaffed, where there's a lot of work to be done, where perhaps they themselves feel that I don't need the full 28 days of leave. I can make do with 2 weeks of leave. I don't mind working. And many public servants historically would accumulate leave and then at some point in time would be paid salary in lieu of leave. Sir, my Ministry of Finance family, the staff of the Ministry of Finance. If you speak with any of them, sir, they can tell you every occasion that they got a salary in lieu of leave payment, they can tell you what they bought with it. Some of them said to me, we bought a laptop to give our daughter. Some said, and these are real cases, you know. Because I said, you know, this salary in lieu of leave that was taken away, was it something that we used to look forward to? Sir, I was given a long list of items. My staff said to me, a member of my staff, sir, said to me, with his voice trembling with emotion, said to me, Minister, I can remember every item that I've bought with my salary in lieu of leave. Every item.
Honorable Minister, I could remember I gave you notice about 2 minutes ago, so you'll have to wind down.
Certainly, sir. And so this particular officer of mine said, bought a laptop, paid for his sister, helped his sister to pay for her tuition fees, bought a TV for his house, bought a 4-burner stove for his house at various times, accumulated cash. Another one said that she accumulated a couple of years of the salary in lieu of leave and then used it as the equity to put up for her loan, to take a loan to build her house on the land, the plot of land that she'd been given by the Ministry of Housing under the previous PPPC government. So that salary in lieu of leave was taken away. They said, take your leave or it's being forfeited because we're not paying salary in lieu of leave. And so when you accumulate the impact of those developments, not to mention, sir, that the mother downstairs with her 3 children, who were school-aged children, lost in an instant a $10,000 cash grant for each of her children. That's $30,000 a year that was taken away from her. It's $30,000 a year that was taken away from her. Mr. Speaker, then the father upstairs, who is a pensioner, and the water meter being in his name, lost the subsidy on water, then had to start to pay VAT on water and VAT on electricity. Sir, when you accumulate the impact of all of these measures, when you accumulate and annualize the impact of these measures, and the calculation is very easy to do. The calculation is very easy to do. The impact on that family, which I just described to you over a 5-year period, and you can do the numbers. The impact of APNU, AFC oppressive policies on that family over a 5-year period would be a staggering $4.7 million. That is the impact on that family. No, over a 5-year period. Over a 5-year. Imagine taking away from, this is a modest family.
The impact will be shutting off your microphone.
I make that point simply to say, sir, that the people of Guyana are not as naive or as gullible as the APNU AFC would have us believe. The people of Guyana are far more sophisticated than that. And the people of Guyana spoke in March 2020 and rejected the oppressive policies of the APNU AFC. The people of Guyana watched on in astonishment from March to August 2020. And even more of them were hardened in their minds, sir, that the APNU AFC neither has the moral authority nor indeed the technical competence to be in government. And sir, my final word would be, the last 5 days, sir, happened for a reason. The last 5 days demonstrated once again to the people of Guyana that the APNU AFC has nothing constructive to offer Guyana. And that is why, sir, the people put them where they are and put the People's Progressive Party Civic where we are. Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to commend Budget 2021 to this Honourable House. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. Thank you very much. Honorable members, the general debate on the budget has just concluded. Before we adjourn, we will consider and dispose of the report of the Business Subcommittee of the Committee of Supply on the allocation of time for the consideration of the 2021 estimates of expenditure by this committee. We will have to go into Committee of Supply for this purpose. The Assembly will now resolve itself into Committee of Supply. Just allowing the honorable members to get seated. The Assembly is now in Committee of Supply. Honorable members, I wish to report that the Business Subcommittee of the Committee of Supply met on Friday, February 26, 2021, and considered the allocation of time for the consideration of the 2021 estimates of expenditure in the Committee of Supply. The subcommittee passed a resolution on the matter. Copies of the subcommittee's minutes, resolution, and schedule have been circulated. Will the Honorable Minister of Finance kindly move, so I shouldn't say Minister, but Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance, kindly move the necessary motion.
Mr. Chairman, I now move that this committee doth agree with the Business Subcommittee in the said resolution.
I put the question. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. Honorable members, the Committee of Supply has allocated 5 days for the consideration of the estimates. Consideration will begin on Tuesday, the 2nd of March, 2021 at 10 a.m. and will continue thereafter on Wednesday, the 3rd of March at 10 a.m., Thursday, the 4th of March at 10 a.m., on Friday, the 5th of March at 10 a.m., and on Monday, March 8th at 10 a.m., being the last day for consideration of these estimates. This is in accordance with the resolution of the subcommittee. Let the Assembly resume. Honorable members, just for your information, the resolution we just passed is taken as a resolution of the entire Assembly, so we don't need to put that again. Honorable members, this concludes our business for today. Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move the adjournment of the Assembly to 10 a.m. on Tuesday, the 2nd of March, 2022.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. Honorable members, the Assembly now stands adjourned to 10 a.m. Tuesday, March 2nd.
We will bend like a bow and never break. Our fathers came here and they lived and died